Chapter 1877. Clang. A dazzling light bloomed in the magic array. The outline of the magic array carved on the ground shone brightly, illuminating the surroundings. Under such circumstances, Luffy stood in the center of the magic array, holding the broom in her hand. Her pink little mouth was mumbling something, as if she was chanting some kind of incantation. Not long after, small balls of light, like fairies, slowly emerged from the magic array. They circled around Luffy's body before dispersing and flying in all directions. Noah, Black Song, and Fenrir quietly waited at the side, watching Luffy bathed in the light of the magic array. They all chose to wait in silence. However, during the waiting process, the human, wolf, and cat's reactions were completely different. Noah kept his eyes on Luffy, who was in the magic array, and remained silent. Black Song's face showed some impatience, as if he was very impatient. He even yawned. As for Fenrir, the most ferocious demon wolf in Norse mythology, he was already lying on the ground, taking a nap. Obviously, Haegu and Fenrir both believed that Luffy would have to spend quite a bit of time to find her target. However, that was to be expected. If this alternate dimension was a complete replica of Chariot King Town, it would take a lot of time to explore every nook and cranny of the place. If she was lucky, perhaps Luffy would find her target immediately. If she was unlucky, then she would have to wait for a long time. Noah had nothing to complain about. He could only wait quietly. Until a certain moment, the yawning Black Song's ears suddenly twitched. He covered his mouth with a happy expression. "Looks like our companions are here first, meow." Hearing this, Noah was startled at first, but then he understood Black Song's meaning. He turned his head and looked in a certain direction. Almost at the same time, a teleportation magic array flashed not far in front of Noah, Black Song, and Fenrir. In the magic array, three figures appeared together with the light, imprinting themselves into Noah's eyes. They were three young men of similar age. The one on the left was a young man who was carrying a staff. He wore armor that resembled that of a general and had a refreshing face. However, he looked like a humanoid monkey. On the right was a swordsman wearing a suit and glasses. He had a knight's sword on his waist that was emitting holy waves. He looked like an elegant gentleman. Standing between the two of them was the White Dragon Emperor who had inherited Lucifer's bloodline. Noah's and Wally's eyes met almost at the same time. "You really are here," Wally said without any surprise. "The moment Monkey said he sensed your key, I knew you were here. Little brother God Slayer, your aura is very special." "I have a deep impression of it as well." The young man with the staff laughed heartily and even greeted Noah. "We meet again, little brother God Slayer. When Wally handed Orpheus over to you, I was hiding by the side. You should have noticed me, so this should be the second time we meet. My name is Beautiful Monkey." "Nice to meet you, Beautiful Monkey." Noah's gaze turned to the other party, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. "A staff, a monkey-like appearance, and you're called Beautiful Monkey. Don't tell me you have something to do with the great sage, equal to heaven, Sun Wukong." "Oh, it seems that little brother God Slayer also knows the old man." Beautiful Monkey touched his chin. "To be precise, the old man is no longer the great sage, equal to heaven, but the victorious fighting Buddha. As for me, I'm considered a monster like that guy's descendant." "Sun Wukong's descendant?" Noah was stunned. "This guy is the descendant of this world's Sun Wukong? No way." Noah couldn't help but murmur. "Can one get married and have children after becoming a Buddha?" Hearing Noah's murmur clearly, Beautiful Monkey was startled at first, then laughed loudly. "As expected of the God Slayer, you only noticed such an interesting thing. But, even if you say so, I don't know how to answer you. After all, the old man did become a Buddha. Maybe that guy fooled around outside before becoming a Buddha and left his bloodline behind. Noah's mouth suddenly twitched. Is it appropriate to say that about your ancestor? The swordsman on the other side of Wukong also spoke. I'm Arthur Pendragon, sir, you can call me Arthur. Arthur. Noah raised his eyebrows. There was indeed no clearer and easier to understand self-introduction than this. Arthur Pendragon was the king of knights in Celtic mythology and British legends. In other worlds, Noah had more than once come into contact with this legend. In the world of the shaped moon, Noah even came into contact with the person himself. In this world, since the swordsman introduced himself like this, there were only two possibilities. Either the swordsman in front of him was King Arthur. Either that, or he had inherited the name from his ancestor. I see. Noah glanced meaningfully at the sword at Arthur's waist that was emitting an unusually strong holy wave. The descendant of King Arthur of Great Britain? Yes. Arthur smiled slightly and pointed at Luffy, who had closed her eyes and concentrated in the magical array. By the way, the girl over there is my sister who has the same bloodline as me. She also inherited the bloodline of the King of Knights. Moreover, everyone here is my teammate. Wukong suddenly smiled. Should be able to catch your eye. The God Slayer. More than just catch my eye. This is simply an all-star level lineup, right? The White Dragon Emperor who inherited the bloodline of Lucifer. The highest level monster in the Nikomata clan. The descendant of Sun Wukong, the great sage equal to heaven. The heir of the King of Knights of Great Britain. The most ferocious god-slaying demonic wolf in Norse mythology. Wukong's team was spectacular to the point that others couldn't imagine. Therefore, the hero faction regarded Wukong's team as a strong opponent and didn't hesitate to attack at this time. In addition, Orpheus, Aster, and Athena might also be transferred here. Cao Cao was arrogant enough to deal with so many people at the same time. Even if the hero faction had 3 highest-level gods' destruction equipment, wasn't it too arrogant? Or, did Cao Cao have a trump card that could suppress this lineup? Noah had to think about it. At this moment, Wukong suddenly spoke. Have you fought with Cao Cao? Noah returned to his senses and looked at Wukong. Under Noah's gaze, Wukong asked. How do you feel? Very strong. Noah curled his lips and smiled. But, he went astray. As I said, he has some abnormal attachment to the identity of a human. Wukong's eyes flickered. In this world, there are only 3 humans who can make me use Tyrannosaurus. One is you, one is him, and the last one is the God's Destruction equipment holder where I used to stay. The place where Wukong used to stay was naturally the Fallen Angel faction. This guy who inherited Lucifer's bloodline and the power of the White Dragon Emperor was brought up by Asher. And in the Fallen Angel faction, there was indeed a God's Destruction equipment holder. That God's Destruction equipment holder should have been in contact with Wukong for a long time, right? I didn't see your battle with Cao Cao. Wukong looked straight at Noah. But, I can guess that you haven't used your full strength yet, right? And then? Noah asked directly. What do you want to say? I want to say that that guy's destruction equipment is also very troublesome, and if he didn't use his full strength, it can only be that he is testing you and trying to find your weakness. Wukong said. Cao Cao definitely knows about your battle with Orpheus. If you were to bring out that level of power, Cao Cao wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow from you. However, he might also know that the power you brought out at that time couldn't be used continuously. Using it would cause an extremely heavy burden. With this weakness, with Cao Cao's insight, it wouldn't be difficult to find a way to restrain you. In other words, Wukong was reminding Noah that it was best not to use the power he used when fighting Orpheus. Otherwise, not only would he fail, but he would also fall into a weakened state for nothing. Unfortunately, Wukong didn't know that Noah's authority was upgrading and couldn't be used. If Cao Cao really formulated a countermeasure against this, it would be useless. Moreover, the current Noah was no longer the Noah of that time. Noah had many trump cards that even Wukong didn't know about. Suddenly, Luffy's voice sounded. I found it. Chapter 1878. Not far from Chariot King Academy, there was a department store. It was the largest department store in Chariot King Town. It was famous for its variety of goods and lively activities during the holidays. During the holidays, the department store would become very lively. The customers could be said to be a sea of people, and it was very popular. This alternate dimension used Chariot King Town as a prototype and replicated the entire town. Of course, the department store not far from Chariot King Academy was also located here. It was almost identical to the department store in Chariot King Town. However, no one would think that this department store was the same as the one in Chariot King Town. Because, no matter the time, the department store would never be as lively as it was now. The surroundings were deserted, and it was so quiet that it was as if there was no sound. It was chilling. However, in front of the entrance of the department store, a few figures slowly appeared. Noah gazed at the department store that was also familiar to him. He turned his head and looked in Lu Fei's direction. Are the members of the Heroes sect really gathered here? Yes. Lu Fei nodded heavily. It's not just the members of the Heroes sect. Sir Noah's companion should also be inside. Is that so? Noah looked at the department store in front of him again and said. By the way, why did you guys come along? Except for Noah, everyone in Wally's team followed. Meow. The black cat tilted its head and said. Don't tell me you plan to go in alone. Hey, you're being a little unkind, Mr. God Slayer, the beautiful monkey shouted. We're all being picked on. If there's a fight, of course we have to fight together, right? We don't mean to hinder you. Arthur pushed the glasses on his face. It's just that, since the Heroes sect attacked us, we have no reason to not fight back. That's it. Wally shrugged. We don't want to compete with you, but since our enemies are all the same, we might as well act together. When we fight, we'll treat it as another matter. You guys really don't know your place. Noah curled his lips. However, since I've been attacked, there's no reason not to fight back. I quite agree with this sentence. After saying that, Noah and all the other members of Wally's team exchanged glances with each other before smiling at the same time. Although they weren't battle maniacs like Wally and the others, at this moment, Noah and the others all had the same thought. That was to teach the hero faction a painful lesson. With such an idea in mind, everyone was just about to step in when Noah suddenly sensed something and subconsciously called out. Wait! Everyone immediately stopped what they were doing. Noah, on the other hand, turned his head and looked in another direction. There, three petite figures slowly walked over as if they were taking a stroll. Seeing the three petite figures, Wally and the others were stunned. Noah's eyes lit up. He took a step forward and hurriedly spoke. Aster. Athena. Orpheus. Impressively, it was the three young girls who had a close relationship with Noah. The three girls also walked over and arrived in front of Noah. I finally found you. Athena, Aster, and Orpheus heaved a sigh of relief. She let out a bitter laugh, which was a rare sight. If you didn't appear, I'm afraid I would have to admit defeat. It seemed that Athena had suffered a lot during the time she spent alone with Aster and Orpheus, these two young girls who didn't know much about the world. It was the first time Noah saw such an expression on Athena's face. For a moment, it was extremely interesting. Master. Aster, on the other hand, held Noah's hand like a child who was about to receive candy. Although his face was still expressionless, his mysterious eyes were fixed on Noah. I have completed my mission very well and have been accompanying the dragon god over there. Is that so? Noah smiled and couldn't help but touch Aster's head. You have done very well, Aster. Master. Aster immediately revealed a comfortable expression and squinted her eyes slightly. Orpheus, on the other hand, looked at Noah for a while before turning his gaze to Varley. Varley also looked at Orpheus and was silent for a moment before speaking. It seems that you have been doing well. Orpheus gazed at Wally, nodded, and replied concisely. Not bad. Is that so? Varley's expression softened a little. He then turned his head away and didn't say anything else. Only Black Song looked at Aster and Athena curiously and tugged at Noah's sleeve. Hey, little brother God Slayer, who are these two little girls to you? They seem a little similar to Bayin. Perhaps. Noah smiled. But, to me, they are more important than kittens. Meow. Black Song's eyes spun around, and in the end, this sentence popped out. In other words, they are your toys. I see. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched. In your heart, kittens are no different from toys. Meow haha. Black Song immediately laughed and turned his head away. No matter how one looked at him, he looked guilty. Noah sighed and ignored the cat that only knew how to act cute. He held Aster's hand and looked at Athena. Were you transferred here as well? That's right. Athena nodded. 1 second, we were still in the room. The next second, we were covered by a fog. When we came back to our senses, we were already here. What an interesting ability. That's about what I expected, Noah asked. Before meeting me, did you meet any enemies? It's just a bunch of monsters. It's not worth mentioning, Athena said casually. Also, we met a few people who called themselves heroes. But because the dragon god was also present, they didn't seem to want to fight us. They just asked us to come here, saying that we would meet you there. In other words, Aster, Athena, and Orpheus were all lured here. Moreover, they were sent by the heroes. Is Chow Chow's target really Orpheus? Wally's voice became low. It seems that the heroes are really going to attack Orpheus. What do you mean? Noah asked. Could it be that the heroes are going to harm Orpheus? That's right, Wally confirmed. Although Chow Chow didn't say it directly, I felt that he had been looking for ways to deal with the dragons. At first, I thought that he wanted to attack you and me. Later, I realized that Chow Chow wasn't just targeting the 2 heavenly dragons. He was also targeting the dragon god who was above the 2 heavenly dragons. No, it's not just the 2 heavenly dragons and the dragon god. Wally's eyes flashed. Maybe even the real Emperor God Red Dragon is his target, that's hard to say. The atmosphere suddenly became heavy. Noah took a deep breath and held Aster's and Athena's hands as he spoke calmly. Apologies, Aster, Athena, I'm going to barge in. Let's go. Athena held Noah's hand and her beautiful snake eyes rippled. I also want to see what the so-called hero's descendant is capable of. I am Master's sword. Aster's answer was even more concise. Everything will be as Master wishes. After saying that, the 2 elven girls closed their eyes and turned into light particles. At the same time, Noah converted all the magic flowing in his body into divine might. In the next moment, the silver holy sword and platinum divine blade appeared in Noah's hands. Seeing this, Wally, Hay, Monkey, Arthur, Luffy, and even Fenrir were shocked. However, at this moment, Noah suddenly stepped forward and raised the divine blade high. Clang! An extremely dazzling light suddenly blossomed from the platinum divine blade, turning into streaks of light that shot into the sky like meteors. Buzz! Amidst an ear-piercing buzzing sound, streaks of platinum light gathered together, gradually forming a platinum sun that resembled a small star, illuminating the entire space. Let's go! Noah's cold voice echoed. The platinum sun suddenly fell and landed on the magnificent building. Boom! The deafening sound turned into a sound wave that resounded through the sky. Chapter 1879. Dong! In an instant, the entire world trembled with such a deafening roar. The rapidly forming platinum sun was like a celestial body that fell from the sky. With the momentum of a meteorite crashing into the earth, it landed heavily in a corner of Chariot Town, setting off a shocking shockwave that spread out in a ring shape. Wherever the shockwave passed, the buildings began to shake violently. Cracks appeared on the walls as if they were ravaged by a passing typhoon. One side cracked, the other side collapsed, and gradually turned into ruins. At the center of the shockwave, the small sun that fell from the sky enveloped the department store, causing the skyscraper-like department store to gradually collapse, and be annihilated in the dazzling light. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. This scene lasted for an unknown period of time. It wasn't until an unknown amount of time had passed that the small sun that fell from the sky dimmed little by little. Its size also shrank until it disappeared. However, at the place where the small sun fell, there was a huge crater that made people shudder. That crater had a diameter of a few kilometers, like a huge meteorite crater. In the huge meteorite crater, the buildings disappeared, the ground disappeared, and even the streets and houses disappeared. All that was left were the rock formations and soil that were exposed to the air. As for a person, there was only one person left. That was Noah, who was holding the heavenly sword of salvation in one hand and the demon slayer in the other. Clang! The strong light that burst out from the divine sword began to recede. Noah slowly opened his eyes, and slowly lowered the divine sword that he held high and looked in front of him. Behind Noah, a piece of land slightly protruded and was lifted up. Inside, Wally and the others were looking at the scene in front of them in shock. It seemed that they had not recovered from the sudden destruction that just happened. Only Orpheus was still expressionless. He stood in front of Wally and the others and lowered his raised hand. Only then did Wally and the others react. "Were you the one who saved us?" Luffy asked Orpheus with lingering fear in her heart. Thank you. Luckily, Orpheus made a move. Otherwise, we would have had no choice but to escape. Black Song patted his plump chest, looking frightened. Seriously, what is Mr. Godslayer doing, meow? Isn't this movement a bit too big? The beautiful monkey couldn't help but let out an exaggerated cry. Don't tell me that Godslayer wants to get rid of us as well. The most shocking thing is that sword. Arthur raised his eyes and stared closely at the divine blade in Noah's hand. For the first time, a look of interest appeared in his eyes. That power just now, was it released by that sword? Is that a holy sword? And it's a mythical level tool. That guy is actually hiding such power. Wally's eyes were also fixed on the holy sword and divine blade in Noah's hands. Chow Chow must be very surprised, right? As if he didn't hear the voice behind him, Noah only looked ahead and spoke abruptly. It's time to come out, right? Or are you really only opponents of this level that can be dealt with? As soon as he finished speaking, a teleportation magic array flashed in front of them. With Noah in the lead, everyone turned their eyes to the magic array. Immediately, the magic array opened like a door. From inside, people slowly walked out and appeared in front of Noah and the others. Those people all carried a very powerful aura. Obviously, those people in front of them were not ordinary powerhouses. Only after these people had walked out did the leader of the hero faction appear as though he had arrived late. He walked out of the door-like magic array. Looking at the huge crater that was a few kilometers in diameter, Chow Chow couldn't help but smile bitterly. Isn't it a bit too exaggerated to use such an attack as an opening? Aren't you one of the people who want to see my power? Noah curled his lips and smiled. If it's not at this level, you won't be satisfied, right? This is no longer the level of satisfaction, it's the level of shock. The bitterness on Chow Chow's face intensified. Your companions are in my hands, and they're with us. Aren't you afraid that the attack just now will kill them all? If you want them to die, you don't have to go through so much trouble to capture them all, Noah said calmly. Then, where are they now? Galgar, Chow Chow sighed and turned his gaze to a youth beside him. Where are they? Hearing this, the young man Chow Chow called Galgar raised his hand and a cloud of mist appeared out of nowhere in the air. This scene instantly attracted Noah's attention to the youth called Galgar. Is that the wielder of Dimension Lost? As if to prove Noah's words, the white fog gathered under Galgar's control. Within the white fog, one figure after another appeared. Like Jesus nailed on the cross, all of the Jumanli's kin were floating in front of the magic circles. Everyone, including Lias, had their heads tilted as if they were asleep. Their faces were extremely peaceful. Noah narrowed his eyes slightly. Dark Song's eyes flickered as he looked at Kitten, who was also nailed on the magic circle. As for the others, they only glanced at the Jumanli's kin. Apart from Luffy, who looked a little worried, Wally, Beautiful Monkey, Arthur, and Fenrir all looked at Chow Chow as if nothing had happened. Chow Chow, Wally asked directly. What is your goal? Don't you know, Wally? Wally. Chow Chow raised the holy spear in his hand and tapped his shoulder. I want to challenge the limits of humans and live on as a hero. So, you want to challenge everyone here? Wally smiled disdainfully. Putting Orpheus aside, do you think you're a match for the two heavenly dragons? No, even I can't handle the two heavenly dragons at the same time. Whether it's you or that Godslayer over there, you're all much stronger than the Red Dragon Emperor and the White Dragon Emperor of the past. Chow Chow suddenly smiled. But, Wally, you should know me. I'm a human. Summing up useful information from past experience and using it to win in the end is what humans do. For example, Noah Doria, I know that you have the power to compete with Orpheus, but that power comes with a terrible burden and can only last for less than a few minutes. Chow Chow looked at Noah and Wally. Wally, it's the same for you. Your Tyrannosaurus Rex also comes with a great burden and can only last for less than a few minutes. Such a weakness is too useful. I only need to speed up the consumption, and whether it's the power comparable to the Dragon God or the Tyrannosaurus Rex, it will become a fatal element that will defeat you without a fight. Wally was speechless. He knew that this time, he could no longer use the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Only Noah remained unmoved. He looked at Chow Chow with eyes full of mockery. However, Chow Chow didn't see it. Orpheus. Chow Chow's eyes turned to Orpheus. I want to fight you too. Hearing Chow Chow's words, Orpheus finally raised his head and met Chow Chow's gaze. Then, Orpheus opened his mouth. Impossible. Chow Chow can't defeat me. I know. Even if I want to challenge the limits of human beings, it doesn't mean that I don't know my own limits. If I were to challenge the strongest dragon god in the world that even the various mythological forces can only fear, I would definitely be killed in an instant. Chow Chow shrugged and immediately changed the topic. There's no other way. I can only borrow a little external force, Galgar. Roger. Galgar stepped forward and his whole body vibrated with magic power. It wasn't the magic power of a demon but the magic power of a sorcerer. Galgar was a sorcerer. In the next moment, a huge magic array appeared on the ground under Galgar. Chapter 1880. Clang. A dazzling light shone from the huge magic array, instantly illuminating the entire space. Although the light wasn't as bright as the light of salvation from the divine saber, its scale was extremely large. Under the illumination of the light, everyone, including Noah, couldn't help but raise a hand in front of them, blocking the dazzling light from their palms. Immediately after, the light shining from the magic array turned into an ominous pitch-black color, blocking the surrounding light, causing the entire world to be engulfed in darkness in an instant, without a trace of light. At that moment, Noah felt it. In the flickering pitch-black light from the magic array, a wave of dark emotion fluctuated. What kind of emotion fluctuation was that? Pain. Resentment. Loathing. Curse. It was as if all the negative emotions in the world had appeared at that moment, turning into invisible waves that were continuously transmitted from the magic array. With his superb sensory ability, Noah was affected by the terrifying negative emotions by tens or hundreds of times, causing his heart to fiercely shrink. If it weren't for Noah's firm willpower and strong mental strength, he would have collapsed long ago under the influence of the terrifying negative emotions that were transmitted after being multiplied by dozens or hundreds of times. Although the others didn't have the same sensory ability as Noah, they all became solemn. What's going on? Black GE's delicate body began to tremble. There's a very strange aura appearing. What kind of aura is that? The beautiful monkey, who could also use immortal techniques, seemed to have felt it as well, and an unprecedentedly ugly expression appeared on his cheerful face. Arthur and Luffy had a solemn expression, while Luffy was somewhat flustered. Even Fenrir began to tighten his body as he growled. As for Varley, his pair of eyes fluctuated violently. What's going on? Varley stared at the magic array and gritted his teeth. There's a kind of fear that comes from the heart. In fact, the power within Noah's body fluctuated violently as well. Finally, it turned into a crimson light that covered Noah's arm, causing the sinister crimson hand to appear. Partner, we're in big trouble. Drake's voice came from the jade on the hand. There was a slight tremble in his voice. Although I don't know what Chow Chow is planning to do, the thing in the magic array is very bad. It's an overwhelming malice directed at the dragon. Directed at the dragon. Noah smacked his lips. Is that Chow Chow's trump card? As Noah smacked his lips, a huge figure slowly emerged from the magic array behind Galgar. Enveloped in pitch-black light and terrifying negative waves, it was imprinted in everyone's eyes. After seeing the full appearance of the huge figure, Noah and Wally's eyes suddenly shrank, and the rest of the people also trembled. It was a xenomorph whose entire body was tightly chained up by torture devices engraved with creepy, ancient words. Its upper body was humanoid, but it had pitch-black wings like a fallen angel. Its lower body was a dragon's tail that was covered in dragon scales. In other words, its upper body was that of a fallen angel, but its lower body was that of a dragon. However, this alien's 2 arms, 1 tail, and even its entire body were pierced by countless nails and nailed to a huge cross. It looked like the incarnation of the world's greatest sin, causing everyone to tremble in fear. That's... Luffy cried out in horror. What's that? No one answered Luffy's question. This was because everyone's attention had been captured by that terrifying xenomorph. At this moment, the alien slowly raised its head. No one could see its appearance clearly. An eye patch-like torture device covered the alien's eyes. Tears of blood flowed out from within, dyeing the alien's entire face red. It was impossible to see its actual appearance. Then, the alien opened its mouth. Woo 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 woo, a sound that sounded like the wail of an evil spirit reverberated in the air. It was the sound of pain, resentment, loathing, cursing, and other negative emotions fused together. That voice made Noah's gauntlet and Wally's light wings tremble fiercely. The fear from Drake and Erubian passed into the hearts of Noah and Wally through the artifact. Under such circumstances, the divine blade in Noah's hand actually began to tremble. My dragon snake body is trembling. Athena's voice rang in Noah's mind. It can even affect me, who has already abandoned my dragon snake body. Noah Doria, you have to be careful. That thing is really bad for dragon snakes. Even Athena warned Noah and called him by his full name. It was easy to imagine how dangerous that strange thing was for a dragon. Noah directly cast a sharp gaze on Chow Chow. His grip on the holy sword and divine blade tightened. It seems that I can't let you continue like this. As soon as he finished speaking, Noah suddenly raised the divine saber and poured his divine power into it, causing the divine saber's body to begin to burst out with intense lightning. However, Chow Chow seemed to have already expected Noah's actions. He raised the holy spear in his hand and pointed it at the Jumanli's followers in the air. I knew it. If it were you, you wouldn't be like Wally and the others. You wouldn't subconsciously choose to continue watching the situation in order to make the battle more exciting. You're not the kind of person who would sit back and watch the situation transition in an unfavorable direction. That's why I captured the Jumanli's followers. After saying that, Chow Chow raised the holy spear high up in the air and said to Noah with a faint smile. Do you want to compete with me? Let's see if your attack will land on us first, or if my attack will land on the Jumanli's followers first. Upon hearing that, Noah's hand paused and a sharp glint finally appeared in his eyes when he looked at Chow Chow. Oh. Are you angry? Chow Chow was not surprised. However, the best part is yet to come. After saying that, Chow Chow snapped his fingers. Whing. Orpheus, who had been watching quietly, suddenly emitted a dark mist. Under the tremors in the air, it turned into a dark sphere, and covered Orpheus' petite body. Orpheus! Black Song and Luffy, who were closest to Orpheus, exclaimed. Noah and Wally, who were standing at the front, turned their heads abruptly and looked in Orpheus' direction. They saw a tentacle-like pipe on the pitch-black sphere that covered Orpheus. It directly connected to the xenomorph's body and connected to the mouth of the xenomorph. It was as if the xenomorph had extended its tongue and connected it directly to the pitch-black sphere that covered Orpheus. Moreover, the tongue was like a blood vessel, constantly pulsing as if it was transmitting something. It was continuously transmitting something from the pitch-black sphere to the half-human, half-dragon xenomorph. Obviously, the xenomorph was absorbing something from Orpheus' body. Don't even think about it. Noah and Wally raised their hands almost at the same time. A magic array flashed in front of their palms, and an astonishing amount of mana gathered in it. A magical light beam and a magical lightning bolt suddenly shot out from the magic array in Noah and Wally's hands. They streaked across space and landed on the blood vessel-like tongue. However, the moment the light beam and the lightning struck, there was a strange, chi sound. It was as if the light beam was being melted and eroded bit by bit. WH. Wally's expression changed. It's useless. Chow Chow laughed. As long as the pipe is connected, no one can interrupt it, including Orpheus. However, while Chow Chow was feeling smug, Noah dashed directly toward Orpheus. Avesta, activate. Counteracted in turn. Simulate the Star Atlas, another cosmology. Dazzling starlight bloomed on Noah's body. Chapter 1881. Clang. Dazzling starlight burst out from Noah's body, illuminating his entire body as if there was a Milky Way lingering around him. Carrying the dazzling starlight, Noah crashed into the black sphere that enveloped Orpheus, much to Chow Chow's and Wally's surprise. Idiot! Chow Chow couldn't help but shout. Samuel's power can not only erase all attacks, but it also has the ultimate dragon kill ability. You are the current Red Dragon Emperor, so you naturally have the dragon attribute. How stupid of you to go against Samuel's power. As soon as Chow Chow said that, the scene that appeared in front of him in the next second made him turn pale with fright. Whing! Noah crashed into the pitch-black sphere like a meteor, and starlight surged all over his body, melting the pitch-black sphere bit by bit. Impossible! Chow Chow cried out. Not to mention Chow Chow, even the members of the hero faction who followed Chow Chow had a drastic change in expression as they cried out one after another. No way! How is this possible? The ultimate dragon kill ability, a power that even the infinite dragon god couldn't do anything about, was broken by the successor of the two heavenly dragons. That's impossible. Unfortunately, no matter how shocked they were, what happened in front of them was the absolute truth. Bang! Under the suppression of the sparkling starlight, the pitch-black sphere suddenly exploded, turning into a pitch-black mist and dissipating. In the black fog, Orpheus closed his eyes and floated in the air. The moment the black fog dissipated, he fell to the ground. Noah hugged Orpheus and landed on the ground. Orpheus! Noah lowered his head and looked at the petite girl in his arms. How are you? At Noah's call, Orpheus' eyelids moved and he slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were still as deep as the night, and his expression didn't change at all. There wasn't even a scar on his body. He looked normal. Noah couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief in his heart. However, at this moment, Orpheus raised his little hand and stared at it for a while. Then, he lifted his head from Noah's arms and looked at Chow Chow. You took away my power. Hearing Orpheus's words, everyone's expression changed. Chow Chow reacted and looked deeply at Noah. He didn't answer Orpheus' question, but instead, he said to Galg. How much of Orpheus' power did you absorb? It's a lot less than we expected. Galger bit his lip. Only about half of it. Half? Chow nodded calmly. Although it's less than what we expected, half of the infinite dragon god's power is enough. So that's how it is. Varley took a step forward, his eyes becoming sharp. Is taking away Orpheus's power your goal? I can't help it, Wally. Although Orpheus is terrifyingly strong, she isn't interested in anything. The only thing that can interest her is the real red dragon god emperor. Even though she seems to be interested in Noah Dole recently, that's because she wants to defeat the real red dragon god emperor, right? Chow Chow sighed. It's too difficult to control such a leader who has no desires and no one knows what she's thinking all day long. Just like this time, Orpheus ran to the side of the god slayer and completely ignored us. That's why I've been planning this since a long time ago. Chow Chow looked straight at Wally. The plan was to take away Orpheus' power and use it to create a doppelganger and make her the leader of the disaster squad. This way, we can truly control the strongest dragon god. Wally's expression darkened. Noah put down Orpheus and turned his gaze to the alien behind Galg. If I didn't hear wrongly, you just called that thing Samuel, right? Chow Chow nodded calmly when he heard Noah's words. However, the expressions of Wally, Hey, Luffy, Beautiful Monkey, and Arthur changed again. Samuel. In the Bible, Samuel transformed into a snake and instigated Adam and Eve to steal the fruit of the Garden of Eden. In this world, Samuel had instigated Adam and Eve to eat the fruits of the Garden of Eden. This had infuriated the God of the Bible, causing the God of the Bible to develop extreme hatred and resentment toward the dragon snakes. The hatred and resentment towards the dragon snake originated from the God of the Bible and was injected into Samuel's body like a curse and poison, causing Samuel to become the embodiment of the God of the Bible's curse and resentment. In the end, he was exiled by the God of the Bible. Noah had heard Asashel mention him before. Therefore, Noah finally understood why that alien posed such a terrifying threat to the dragon snake. It was because he was cursed by the God of the Bible to become a snake that was erased from existence. Therefore, he was extremely lethal to snakes and their close relatives, the dragon snake. It had nothing to do with strength, and was purely an existence that was the nemesis of the dragon snake. To ordinary people, it was just a somewhat terrifying thing. However, to the dragon snake, it was something that was enough to erase their existence. Even Orpheus couldn't resist him. Or rather, it was precisely because it was Orpheus that Samuel became unable to resist. That was the ultimate power against the dragon snake. As long as it was a dragon, then the more powerful it was, the greater the threat Samuel posed. An existence like Orpheus, who was known as the strongest dragon god in the world, was targeted by Samuel. It was simply impossible to resist. Even Orpheus was in such a state, let alone the two heavenly dragons that were lower than the dragon god, as well as those dragons that were lower than the two heavenly dragons. Therefore, Samuel's existence was believed to cause the complete extinction of the dragon race, and even creatures other than the dragon race might be affected. Hence, he was sealed in the deepest part of the underworld by the gods of Greek mythology, thrown into the river Styx, and guarded by Hades, who was in charge of the underworld. Why would something that was sealed in the underworld appear here? Wally asked in puzzlement, and then immediately understood. Could it be Hades? You're right. Chow Chow chuckled. Hades hated demons and fallen angels very much, but the main gods of Greece began to contact demons and fallen angels because of the peace agreement between the three major forces in the Bible and mythology. Hades was very dissatisfied. In addition, Hades coveted Orpheus's power, so we made an agreement with Hades of the underworld. Under the premise of increasing multiple restrictions, we were allowed to summon Samuel once. As Chow Chow's words fell, the xenomorph standing above the massive magic array began to sink into the magic array, slowly disappearing from sight. At this time, Siegfried walked out from Chow Chow's other side and spoke in a deep voice. In our plan, Samuel should have absorbed more power, and we could have used him to deal with the two heavenly dragons. I didn't expect that the power that even Orpheus couldn't resist was neutralized by the God Slayer's mysterious ability. Chow Chow, what should we do next? Our main goal was Orpheus's power. Although we only absorbed half of it, it's considered a success. We can use this power to create a new Orpheus. There's nothing to regret, Chow Chow said indifferently. Since the most basic goal has been achieved, it doesn't matter if we retreat here. As soon as he finished speaking. Retreat? Noah raised his head and looked at Chow Chow. Can you retreat? Don't forget, we still have hostages. Chow Chow smiled. Also, we can get more helpers. Leonardo. At Chow Chow's call, a short boy immediately stood out. In an instant, a shadow under the little boy named Leonardo gradually expanded and covered the surrounding ground. Immediately, huge demonic beasts crawled out from the shadow and roared at the sky. Roar! 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 The roars of the demonic beasts resounded through the sky. In addition to the demonic beasts, grim reapers wearing black robes and holding scythes emerged from the ground one after another. They floated into the air and instantly filled the entire sky. Looking at the grim reapers flying in the sky, Wally spoke in a deep voice. As expected, Hades has provided help to the hero faction. A great battle was about to break out. Chapter 1882. In this world, the so-called Grim Reapers were the followers of Hades, the god of the underworld. Just like the Norse Valkyrie, the Grim Reapers were equivalent to demigods. They were the same as the Grim Reapers that everyone knew. They were responsible for harvesting the souls of those who were about to die and bringing these souls into the underworld. When they saw the large number of Grim Reapers emerging from the ground, everyone understood. The only person who could send the Grim Reapers was the god of the underworld, Hades. In other words, the information given by Chow Chow was completely correct. Hades had really signed an agreement with the people from the heroes' faction. Not only did he lend Samuel to the heroes' faction, he even brazenly sent the Grim Reapers' army here. His goal was to obtain Orpheus, who had lost most of his power. As for the magical beasts that emerged from the shadow of the little boy named Leonardo, it should be the ability of the Annihilation Maker, right? The little boy named Leonardo from the heroes' faction was the wielder of the Annihilation Maker, one of the 4 highest-level god tools. The Feast of the Grim Reapers and the magical beasts is being held by us, the descendants of the heroes and the brave. Some people would not agree, but this is also to defeat you. Chow Chow raised the holy spear and pointed it forward. Noah Dole, Wally Lucifer, Red Dragon Emperor, White Dragon Emperor, God Slayer, Lucifer. As opponents, they are the best. Before we retreat, let us have a battle of the highest level." As soon as he finished speaking, the Grim Reapers and the roaring magical beasts that filled the sky immediately moved together. The Grim Reapers streaked across the sky, raised the scythes in their hands high, and rushed in the direction of Noah and the others like a storm. The magical beasts shook the earth, carrying a ferocious aura and killing intent. Amidst the deafening roar, they rushed forward like they were covering the sky and earth. The momentum was as if the end of the world had arrived, and the gates of hell had opened in this world. It made people's hearts tremble. However, none of the people present showed a look of fear. Except for Noah and Orpheus, Wally and the others all had a terrifying aura. Wally flapped his wings and soared into the sky before stopping in midair. Balance breaker. A dazzling light burst out from Vale's body and covered his entire body. In the light, Wally's body was gradually covered by a set of silver armor. His appearance was like a small white dragon, appearing in the sky occupied by the death gods, which was particularly eye-catching. As soon as he appeared, Wally immediately used Forbidden Hand. Disappear. A surge of mana fluctuated on Wally's palm, turning into bolts of lightning that swept in all directions like a berserk lightning pool. As soon as the vanguard of the Grim Reapers came in contact with the violent lightning, they were instantly annihilated by the thick lightning. Not even their bones remained. The power of the strongest white dragon emperor in history was on full display here. Somersault Cloud. At the same time, the beautiful monkey formed a hand seal. A golden cloud immediately gathered under his feet and he stepped on it. The beautiful monkey stepped on the somersault cloud and soared into the sky. While Wally's magic attack was still raging, she rushed into it without hesitation and dodged the violent lightning bolts with great agility. Take this. The beautiful monkey, who was nimbly shuttling through the violent lightning attack, waved the cudgel in his hand. The tip of the cudgel vibrated with chi, and in the harsh whistling sound, he swung it at the Grim Reapers that were not killed by the lightning. Suddenly, the Grim Reapers that were swung by the cudgel in the beautiful monkey's hand were sent flying like balls. They all fell from the sky like kites with broken strings. It seemed that as the descendant of Sun Wukong, the beautiful monkey's fighting style was almost the same as the great sage, Heaven's equal. With the golden cudgel to ensure the attack power, the somersault cloud to ensure the speed, and the ever-changing immortal art, he was simply invincible. As a result, under the joint efforts of Wally and the beautiful monkey, the dense group of Grim Reapers did not even have the power to resist and were unilaterally crushed. After all, the Grim Reapers also had ranks. Just like the demons had ranks, the Grim Reapers were also divided into low-level Grim Reapers, mid-level Grim Reapers, high-level Grim Reapers, and top-level Grim Reapers. The Grim Reapers here were basically all mid-level Grim Reapers and low-level Grim Reapers. Their strength was almost the same as mid-level and low-level demons, but the scythe in their hands could hurt the soul. If one paid attention to the scythe, it was not worth mentioning for Wally and the beautiful monkey. The demonic beasts on the ground were blocked by the rest of Wally's team. Haegu was a combination of mana, sorcery, and immortal art. His strength was comparable to that of the top-level demons. In the midst of the stampeding demonic beasts, Haegu used an unknown power to create clones. His clones shuttled among the demonic beasts and launched a mixed attack of mana, sorcery, and immortal art. The demonic beasts that were hit by Haegu's mana, sorcery, and immortal art were either annihilated or sent flying like those Grim Reapers. Their entire body shriveled as if all their vitality had been sucked dry, and they died without a burial place. Roar! Occasionally, a ferocious demonic beast suddenly rushed in front of one of Haegu's clones. With a violent roar, it opened its bloody mouth full of sharp teeth and swallowed Haegu. However, at the same time, another Haegu flashed behind that demonic beast. Idiot! That's just a phantom. Haegu sneered and waved his long kimono sleeve. A purple mist immediately spread out and covered that ferocious demonic beast. It was poison. To be more precise, it should be called a sorcery of the poison attribute. Under the shroud of the poisonous mist, the ferocious demonic beast let out a painful cry and then gradually fell to the ground. After struggling for a while, it stopped moving. "I have to fight too." Luffy, who was standing at the back, suddenly raised the broom in her hand. She closed her eyes and muttered incantations, causing magic arrays to flash in the space around her. A considerable amount of mana was gathered in those magic arrays. Under the effect of the spells and rituals, the mana turned into pure attribute attacks in the magic arrays. Immediately after, flames, storms, cold air, and lightning swept across the space like a celestial maiden scattering flowers from a celestial maiden. The flames burned the demonic beasts to ashes. The storm blew the huge bodies into the sky. The cold air froze the opponents into ice. The lightning defeated the demonic beasts. As for those lucky fishes that managed to pass through Luffy's large area of effect attribute magic and spells, they were stopped by two figures when they charged towards Luffy. Roar! Fenrir, who was many times smaller than the demonic beasts, rushed out and swept past the bodies of the demonic beasts in an instant. After Fenrir swept past the bodies of the demonic beasts, those demonic beasts suddenly stopped, blood sputtered from their bodies and they fell down. Looking carefully, there were holes on the bodies of those demonic beasts. Those were the marks left behind by Fenrir's fangs. God-killing fangs. If a mere demonic beast was bitten, it would definitely die. As for the other figure, Arthur, who was Luffy's brother, coldly waved the knight's sword in his hand, causing sword light to suddenly flash and cut through the bodies of those demonic beasts. Every time the sword light flashed, those demonic beasts were directly torn apart. Their bodies were broken into pieces and their death was extremely terrifying. Although I don't really want to wave this holy monarch's sword at ordinary demonic beasts, a battle is a battle. There's no other way. Saying such callous words, Arthur's expression didn't change as he brandished his most powerful holy sword and beheaded the magic beasts that were madly charging towards him. In the blink of an eye, a large number of grim reapers and demonic beasts died in the hands of Wally's team. Not only were the members of this team famous, but their strength was also ridiculously strong. Under such circumstances, Noah just held the holy sword and divine blade, looking ahead, stepping on the blood and minced meat on the ground, and walked straight forward. There, Chow Chow carried the holy spear with a joyful expression on his face. Chapter 1883. On the bloody battlefield, Noah and Chow Chow ignored everything around them and looked at each other in the air. However, the two of them behaved completely differently. Noah looked at Chow Chow with cold eyes. Chow Chow's gaze towards Noah was filled with delight. In the next second, Chow Chow's line of sight suddenly moved down and turned to look at the demon slayer and heavenly sword in Noah's hands. He did not hide his curiosity as he asked. He didn't hide his curiosity and asked, "Can you tell me where your swords came from?" Noah did not pay attention to Chow Chow's monologue. His eyes were fixed on Chow Chow. The divine might in his body surged violently and poured into the holy sword and divine blade. Clang! The silver holy sword and the platinum heavenly sword shone brightly. It was as if Noah was holding onto two rays of light. Under the boundless light, he kept walking in the direction of Chow Chow. Noah didn't want to waste any more time talking to Chow Chow. Chow Chow naturally understood this as well. The holy spear on his shoulder lowered slightly. "I thought I had studied you thoroughly, but I didn't expect you to use an unknown powerful weapon. Also, your ability to neutralize Samuel's power is very mysterious. I really don't want to fight you under such circumstances." Despite saying so, the corners of Chow Chow's mouth couldn't help but curl upwards as if he was expressing his true feelings. However, it's human nature to be excited in the face of the unknown. "Let me see how mysterious you are in battle." After that, Chow Chow pointed the holy spear in his hand at Noah. Balance breaker. The holy spear of Godslayer shone. The flash of light turned into a round wheel that emitted holy waves and appeared behind Chow Chow. On the outline of the round wheel, 7 bowling ball-sized spheres appeared abruptly. They surrounded Chow Chow and floated in the air. Noah suddenly stopped in his tracks and his eyes began to ripple. Is that the balance breaker of the most powerful godly destruction tool? Isn't it a little too calm? Whether it was Noah or Wally, when they used the balance breaker, it caused a huge commotion. However, Chow Chow's balance breaker was like the full moon at night, silently rising into the night sky. It was so calm that it felt strange. Noah's intuition told him that balance breaker was definitely not as calm and simple as it looked on the surface. The next moment, his intuition was confirmed. Let me show you my 7 treasures. Chow Chow raised the holy spear that didn't change at all. With just this action, one of the 7 spheres floating around him suddenly floated to Chow Chow's front and flew into his hand. Luan Bao. Following Chow Chow's shout, the sphere in Chow Chow's hand suddenly trembled. Wang. A burst of invisible fluctuations suddenly shook the space, like a wave, instantly covering the surroundings. It was also at this moment that the invisible ripples began to surge violently. Then, in Noah's hands, the brilliance of the elven devices named Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword of Salvation suddenly dimmed. Noah couldn't help but be surprised. What? Chow Chow was also surprised. Obviously, the abnormality of the Holy Sword and Heavenly Sword was beyond their expectations. At this moment, Aster's voice sounded in Noah's mind. Master, the power of that holy spear is interfering with us. Interfering? Noah looked at Chow Chow with a terrifying look in his eyes. What did you do? The one who answered Noah's question was not Chow Chow but Wally, who fell from the sky. That's the ability of Chow Chow's forbidden hand. Wally stared at the 7 spheres around Chow Chow and said in a deep voice. Chow Chow's forbidden hand can use the ability called the 7 treasures, which are the 7 spheres. Each sphere represents an ability. The so-called 7 treasures are 7 completely different abilities. 7. Noah was really surprised. Although divine artifacts all had unique abilities, most divine artifacts only had one type of ability. Only God Annihilation artifacts could have more than 2 types of abilities. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear can multiply and transfer. As for White Dragon Emperor's light wings, Divine Dividing, it reduced the absorption by half. But Chow Chow's forbidden hand can have 7 abilities. That's simply unheard of. So, that forbidden hand is not the original forbidden hand of the Holy Spear. Wally said. That's a subspecies of forbidden hand. Every divine artifact has its own forbidden hand. As long as the conditions are met, the wielder will be able to obtain the power of the forbidden hand and increase the power of the divine artifact by several times. However, divine artifacts can also change and evolve according to the wielder's thoughts, becoming stronger and stronger. If the original forbidden hand of the divine artifact was not suitable for the wielder, then a brand new forbidden hand would be born or developed. That is a subspecies of forbidden hand. Different from the original forbidden hand of the divine artifact, a new type of forbidden hand. The original forbidden hand of the Holy Spear is not suitable for me, so I developed this subspecies of forbidden hand and obtained the ability called the 7 treasures. Chow Chow raised the sphere in his hand. This is one of the 7 treasures, the Luan treasure. It has the ability to destroy weapons, starting from the strongest weapon within its range. Originally, I was going to use it to destroy Arthur's Holy King's sword, but after seeing the power of the sword in your hand, I felt that the Luan treasure should first destroy your sword. Facts have proven that your sword is stronger than the strongest holy sword, but it's a bit too strong. The Luan treasure's ability can only suppress it to a certain extent, but it can't destroy it. This is the forbidden hand of the strongest divine artifact. Generally speaking, there shouldn't be any weapon that can't be destroyed. Unfortunately, Noah's elven device is not an ordinary weapon. Even the forbidden hand of the strongest divine artifact can't destroy it. However, just as Chow Chow said, although the Luin treasure can't destroy Aster and Athena, it can suppress the elven device's power to a certain extent. Other than the Luin treasure, my forbidden hand has 6 other abilities. However, one of them can't be effective against you, so I'll use it on someone else. Chow Chow raised his hand. Female treasure. One of the spheres floating around Chow Chow suddenly trembled and shot out. It streaked across the sky at an extremely fast speed, nimbly dodging the grim reapers and demonic beasts, and rushed to the front of a person. That person was Haegu. Be careful. Wally couldn't help but shout. Before that, Haegu seemed to have sensed Chow Chow's attack by relying on the flow of chi. Without any hesitation, he waved his long sleeves, causing a fog to envelop him, and his body became illusory. However, at the same time, the sphere also bloomed with a dazzling light. The light directly enveloped Haegu, causing Haege's illusory body to gradually solidify. Shrouded in the light, Haegu struggled with great difficulty, unable to move his body. It's useless. The female treasure is able to completely seal the power of the women in the field for a certain period of time, starting from the strongest one, and it can't be avoided. Of course, it's useless against men. Chow Chow curled his lips and smiled, raising a hand. Then, what kind of ability should I use next? As soon as he finished speaking, the spheres surrounding Chow Chow suddenly trembled and shot out, rushing in the direction of Noah and Wally. Noah's footsteps suddenly staggered, but instead of retreating, he moved forward. Violent divine power poured into the holy sword and divine saber, causing the holy sword and divine saber to shine again. The light was many times weaker than the holy sword and divine saber from before. However, Noah was still like an arrow that left the bow, rushing forward in the faint sound of the air breaking. On the way, Noah avoided all the spheres, allowing Noah to rush in the direction of Chow Chow, who was behind him. Although he didn't know what other abilities Chow Chow would use, those abilities were all based on the spheres. Therefore, Noah only needed to go straight for Chow Chow, who no longer had any spheres around him. Chapter 1884. Clang! The light shining on the Demon Slayer and Heavenly Sword was extremely weak, proving that Luin Bao's ability was still working. Luin Bao's ability was able to destroy Aster and Athena, who had turned into elven devices. In order to resist such power, both Aster and Athena had to use their own power to resist, causing the amount of power they could provide to Noah was much less. However, Noah was still pouring a steady stream of divine might into the Holy Sword and Heavenly Sword, activating the power of the 2 highest grade elven devices. Absolute Sword Technique. Initial form Purple Lightning. The extremely fast thrust allowed Noah to dash out like lightning, almost impossible to catch with the naked eye. However, because the power provided by the elven devices decreased, Chow Chow was still able to catch sight of Noah's figure. He's coming straight for me. Did he see through my weakness again? Chow Chow was not surprised but delighted. You are indeed the best human. Noah Dole. Chow Chow, who was shouting, did not dodge Noah's attack. Poochie. In the next moment, the silver holy sword and platinum heavenly sword pierced through Chow Chow's body, causing a clear tearing sound to reverberate in the surroundings. However, Noah's expression did not have the slightest trace of joy. Instead, his gaze sharpened as he released the divine might gathered under his feet and flashed away like a phantom. Almost at the same time, another Chow Chow suddenly appeared in front of the Chow Chow who was pierced through by the holy sword and heavenly sword. The holy spear in his hand was like a flash of light as it pierced through Noah's original position and pierced through the other Chow Chow. Bang! Amidst the muffled explosion, the holy spear that killed the Chow Chow who was pierced through by the holy sword and heavenly sword suddenly exploded. Oh! Chow Chow calmly withdrew his holy spear. You didn't succeed. TSK. Noah was speechless. Doppelganger and teleportation. As expected of you, to be able to see through it so quickly. Chow Chow smiled cheerfully and summoned 2 spheres. Ma Bao can move himself and his enemies at will. Scholar Bao can create multiple clones. After using Forbidden Hand, I had activated their abilities. I left a doppelganger at the original location and then moved it to another location. When you attack me, I will move back and decide the victor with 1 strike. That is my plan, Chow Chow revealed a fearless smile. That's because I believe that you'll definitely be able to see through my weakness and directly ignore the 7 treasures to attack me. Not only was this guy's ability to restrain others, but his thinking was also so meticulous. He had completely combined strength and wisdom in a battle. It was really troublesome. No wonder even Wally was forced to use Tyrannosaurus. Undoubtedly, Chow Chow was only a human, but he relied on the power of the strongest god's destruction tool and his own training and thinking to reach such a level. I'm afraid that in this world, no human could be stronger than Chow Chow, right? An extremely skilled opponent like Chow Chow, who had a variety of abilities and meticulous thinking, was really too difficult to deal with. Although he didn't ask Wally whether he had won against Chow Chow after using Tyrannosaurus, Noah already knew the result without asking. There was no doubt that after using Tyrannosaurus, Wally would never lose to Chow Chow, but he still couldn't win against Chow Chow. After all, although Tyrannosaurus was very powerful and could allow Wally to instantly obtain the power of a Rubian before it was sealed, reaching the level of the Sky Dragon and contending with the top 10 masters in the world, it was only power at best. Coupled with the extremely serious consumption, even if Wally used Tyrannosaurus, there was still a gap between him and the top 10 masters in the world. If it weren't for this, Wally wouldn't have been so easily defeated by Noah, who had just become a god slayer not long ago. However, even so, Wally, who used Tyrannosaurus, was definitely not weaker than a god like Loki. It was definitely not a problem for him to reach 4 digits. The only problem was that the consumption was too high and the duration was too short. Therefore, in Noah's opinion, without understanding all the abilities of Chow Chow's 7 treasures, Wally should have been delayed by Chow Chow until the duration of Tyrannosaurus was over. It was no wonder that Chow Chow could lead the heroes faction and stand above the major factions in the group of disasters, and contend with the descendants of the old Demon King faction. Both Wally and Black Song had a very high opinion of Chow Chow, and even reminded Noah more than once to be careful of him. It was not unreasonable. At that moment, Noah took a deep breath and calmly said, "Aster, Athena, you two should rest for a while." Both Aster and Athena did not respond. However, the holy sword and the divine blade suddenly turned into a burst of light particles and disappeared in Noah's hand. Seeing this scene, Chow Chow raised his eyebrows. However, before Chow Chow could speak, Noah calmly said, "Chow Chow, you didn't let your title as the strongest god's extermination tool go to waste. You've already unleashed the power of that spear to the fullest. You've even developed a subspecies of Forbidden Hand. I now understand why Wally thinks you're the strongest existence among humans. To be able to receive such a high evaluation from you, it is truly an honor." Chow Chow narrowed his eyes. Without batting an eyelid, he summoned the 7 spheres to his side. "But didn't you also kill a god as a human? So, since you have fully demonstrated your ability, it is about time for me to show you my full strength." Noah looked directly at Chow Chow. "My current full strength." "Your current full strength?" Chow Chow was stunned. However, in the next moment, Chow Chow's eyes suddenly focused. Because, with a flash, a crimson gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. "Drag," Noah said calmly. "Is that okay?" "No problem." Drake's voice sounded from the jade in the gauntlet. "Samuel is no longer here, and I have recovered. You can use your current full strength as much as you want. Partner." Hearing this, Noah suddenly smiled and raised the gauntlet in his hand high up. In the next moment, the divine aura running wildly in Noah's body was converted into mana and poured into the crimson gauntlet. Forbidden Hand, Balance Breaker. The crimson gauntlet suddenly bloomed with an unprecedentedly dazzling light, setting off waves of crimson waves that turned into visible airwaves and spread out in all directions like a violent wind. Seeing this, Chow Chow's expression became serious. Wally, who was watching from the side, mumbled. Is he finally going to use that forbidden hand? When the demons, angels, and fallen angels formed a peace treaty, Wally, as a member of the disaster group, launched an attack on the three major forces. At that time, the one who faced Wally was Noah. Wally had never forgotten Noah's forbidden hand at that time. It should be said that everyone who saw Noah use forbidden hand at that time did not forget that scene. The crimson airwaves shook the air and covered Noah's body amidst the tremors. The crimson gauntlet in Noah's hand disintegrated little by little like illusory scales and merged with the crimson airwaves. Bang! The surging airwaves shook Noah's body, stirring up waves of sand and dust, causing the ground to tremble slightly. As if a crimson dragon's shadow covered Noah's body, Noah, who was surrounded by crimson airwaves, opened his eyes and looked at Chow Chow. Meeting Noah's gaze, Chow Chow's hand holding the holy spear tightened bit by bit. As expected, your forbidden hand is also a subspecies. The second heavenly dragon's forbidden hand was originally a materialized armor. However, in the past, because Noah's forbidden hand had merged with the Dragon Emperor's chi scales, it had turned into a set of chi armor instead of a physical armor. Now, with the reappearance of the artifact, the forbidden hand of the gauntlet once again reappeared as an airwave. Different from the original forbidden hand, Noah's forbidden hand was naturally a subspecies of forbidden hand. We're both users of the subspecies forbidden hand. Is your 7 treasures more powerful than my chi armor? Let's see. Chapter 1885. Boost 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 boost. When the disorderly voices rang out in succession from the crimson dragon silhouette on Noah's body, Noah's aura skyrocketed like a volcanic eruption, causing the crimson airwaves around him to rise like flames. Chow Chow's expression changed slightly. He swung the holy spear in his hand. The light wheel and the 7 spheres behind him shone brightly. However, at this moment, Chow Chow felt an extraordinary sense of crisis in his heart. That sense of crisis caused Chow Chow's pupils to shrink. Without hesitation, he summoned a sphere. Xiang Bao. Immediately, Chow Chow's body floated up and soared into the sky. Xiang Bao was a very ordinary but practical flying ability. The instant Chow Chow's figure soared into the sky, a crimson figure streaked across the sky, instantly arriving at Chow Chow's original location. Bang! The fist covered by the red scales was like a meteorite, heavily bombarding the ground where Chow Chow was originally standing. The ground was smashed into pieces, as if it was collapsing, constantly sinking. In the blink of an eye, a huge crater with a diameter of several hundred meters appeared on the ground, causing a violent shock wave and a thick cloud of dust to sweep out in all directions. The demonic beasts and grim reapers that were affected by the violent impact were all blasted away, like pieces of paper, heavily smashing into the surrounding ground. Immediately, everyone in Wally's team, including Wally, ran away in panic. Meanwhile, Chow Chow, who had flown into the sky, looked down at the scene that resembled a meteor crashing into Earth. Cold sweat trickled down his forehead. However, the sense of crisis in Chow Chow's heart did not decrease but instead increased. Buzz! In an instant, from the crater that was shaking violently and filled with sand and dust, a magical light beam that could pierce through heaven and earth suddenly burst out, shaking the air. Under the trembling of the air, the light beam shot up to the sky and violently shot towards Chow Chow. That magical light beam had obviously undergone a lot of amplification. It was incomparably huge, with a diameter of hundreds of meters. Chow Chow, who was less than 2 meters tall, was like a tiny speck of sand in front of it. His vision was completely filled by that terrifying light beam. Jewel! Chow Chow shouted. A sphere suddenly appeared in front of him. The sphere twisted and turned into a vortex, which continued to expand. The huge light beam that soared into the sky directly fell into the vortex, and was absorbed by the vortex. Jewel, the ability to absorb the enemy's attack and freely reflect the attack. With this ability, Chow Chow could transfer the attack to another place or return it to its owner. At this moment, Chow Chow chose to reflect it. Therefore, in the huge vortex, the magical light beam that had just been absorbed suddenly shot out from the sky. It streaked across the sky at a speed faster than when it came, and directly rushed toward the crater on the ground. Boost, 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 boost. However, in the crater that was still shaking violently and filled with thick sand and dust, a series of disorderly voices rang out once again and entered Chow Chow's ears. Shortly after, Chow Chow's expression changed abruptly. A beam of light that was even larger than the one that was deflected by him blasted away the violent impact and the dense sand and dust. Once again, it soared into the sky and collided with the beam of light that was descending from the sky. Boom! In the deafening roar, the two light beams fiercely collided in mid-air, stirring up an astonishingly strong light and a terrifying impact that surged in all directions like a wave. The aftermath not only scattered the clouds in the sky, but also engulfed the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts one by one. In the screams and roars of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts, they were annihilated one by one, leaving no trace behind. Ha! Chow Chow, who was some distance away from the center of the impact, was also affected. He was fiercely blown away by the violent impact. He could only unfold the jewel sphere in front of him and turn it into a vortex to constantly absorb the impact and avoid being hurt. Chow Chow's strength lay in his endless means, superb skills, and agile and meticulous thinking. In terms of defense, he was a complete mess. If Chow Chow were to be hit by the shockwaves, he would be done for. Chow Chow couldn't help but shudder when he sensed the terrifying shockwaves surging toward him. Is that the power of the combination of the God Slayer and the God's Destruction gear? Is that the power of the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear's subspecies Forbidden Hand? Terrifying. Truly too terrifying. After using Forbidden Hand, Noah's pressure on Chow Chow was no less than Wally using T-Rex. No. Compared to Wally, Noah is undoubtedly more terrifying. When facing Wally, Chow Chow was able to rely on his opponent's unfamiliarity with the 7 abilities of his Forbidden Hand to stall for time. He was able to endure the duration of T-Rex and fight Wally to a draw. However, Noah had only used Forbidden Hand and not Tyrannosaurus. Although Forbidden Hand would also consume a certain amount of energy, even Wally could maintain Forbidden Hand for a month. Chow Chow believed that Noah's Forbidden Hand could only be longer than Wally's Forbidden Hand. In other words, Chow Chow's current opponent was like Wally using T-Rex with no restrictions and no consumption. Stalling for time was akin to courting death. However, such a powerful Forbidden Hand must have a certain degree of weakness. Chow Chow's eyes flashed with madness. As long as I can rely on the 7 treasures to stall for time, I will definitely be able to find the weakness of that subspecies Forbidden Hand. That's right, Noah's Forbidden Hand does indeed have a weakness. That is, its consumption is frightening. Even if a god were to use it, they would die suddenly. Unfortunately, that weakness had no effect on Noah, who had the 3rd perpetual motion machine, at all. Whoosh! In the next second, with a sharp piercing sound, a crimson figure swept through the entire space like a meteor and shot straight toward Chow Chow's direction. Chow Chow's heart suddenly shook. He quickly summoned Ma Bao's sphere to his side and used his teleportation ability to instantly disappear. However, the crimson meteor that soared into the sky also fiercely changed direction at an astonishing speed. Chow Chow's figure just happened to appear there. The crimson meteor arrived in front of Chow Chow and imprinted Noah's figure into Chow Chow's eyes. The teleportation ability is indeed very powerful. However, as long as I concentrate and sense the movement of the surrounding space, I will be able to find you. Noah's voice clearly entered Chow Chow's ears, causing Chow Chow's heart to tremble violently. Previously, I was distracted by your forbidden hand. However, it does not mean that the same method will work again, Chow Chow. After saying that, a fist carrying a surging crimson airwave and terrifying whistling winds suddenly blasted out. Amidst the ear-piercing explosion, it heavily bombarded Chow Chow. At this moment, an unprecedented strong sense of crisis screamed in Chow Chow's heart. For Chow Chow, whose defense was too weak, Noah's full-strength attack in the Forbidden Hand state was enough to make him explode instantly. Ma Bao's teleportation ability was useless against Noah. The jewelry's absorption ability was used to absorb the aftermath of the impact. If he used it now, he would only be shocked to death by the aftermath of the impact. Zhu Shibao's doppelganger ability had been seen through by Noah from the beginning. It could not reverse the situation at all. Luan Bao and Woman Bao, which were used against weapons and women, were useless against Noah. Xiang Bao only had the ability to fly. Under such circumstances, Chow Chow could only use the last ability of the Sacred Spear Forbidden Hand. General Bao. This ability represented a powerful destructive power. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Therefore, the pitch-black sphere exploded like thunder and heavily charged toward Noah's direction. Dong! The fist and the sphere suddenly collided, causing an earth-shattering sound. Chapter 1886. Boom! The violent shockwaves exploded in mid-air, forming a circular shockwave that spread out in all directions, causing the entire atmosphere to become chaotic and chaotic. The fist that was covered by the crimson dragon scale-like shockwave collided with the sphere that carried an astonishing power. They were in a stalemate, causing waves of shockwaves to fluctuate, stirring up the entire sky as if it was attacked by a typhoon, becoming extremely chaotic. Chow Chow, who had low defensive power, used the jewel vortex that had been absorbing the shockwave to block in front of him, not daring to touch the violent shockwave at all. Seeing Noah's fist and the general's treasure in a stalemate, Chow Chow's mind quickly turned. It seems that Forbidden Hand is still a Forbidden Hand after all. No matter how powerful Noah Dole's Forbidden Hand is, it's still inferior to Tyrannosaurus in terms of strength. If it was Wally's Tyrannosaurus, even if Chow Chow's general's treasure's destructive power was several times greater, it would still be defeated in an instant. After all, in terms of strength, Tyrannosaurus was among the top 10 in the world. It was definitely not something that the Sacred Spear's Forbidden Hand could block. In terms of strength, Noah's Forbidden Hand was still weaker than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. However, Tyrannosaurus consumed a lot of energy, but Forbidden Hand didn't have this weakness. In terms of endurance and practicality, Noah Dole's Forbidden Hand was undoubtedly stronger than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. The threat was much greater than Wally's Tyrannosaurus. Before finding its weakness, Chow Chow absolutely couldn't let his guard down. Chow Chow's mind was highly concentrated. However, no matter how concentrated he was, Chow Chow didn't expect the next development. Penetrate. When such a word resounded from Noah's body, a terrifying power suddenly penetrated the general's treasure that was in a stalemate and soared up from Noah's fist. Chow Chow didn't even have time to react. The powerful force fiercely rushed over and heavily landed on his body. Boom! A heavy muffled sound shook Chow Chow's body. Poochie! Chow Chow violently coughed out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was sent flying by the powerful force. Like a kite with a broken string, he heavily smashed into the ground and rolled a few times before coming to a stop. An indescribable pain spread throughout Chow Chow's body. However, Chow Chow couldn't care less about the pain that came from his whole body. His mind was filled with questions that he couldn't understand. What? What happened? Just now, he was hit, right? Was that Noah's attack? How did he do it? How did he do it? How did he do it? The unexpected situation caused Chow Chow's meticulous thinking to be like a dead machine, constantly jamming. At this time, Noah's voice sounded. That's penetration. Hearing this, Chow Chow's mind suddenly became clear as if he had returned to normal. Ignoring the intense pain all over his body, he planted the holy spear on the ground and propped himself up. Penetrate. Chow Chow propped himself up with difficulty and stared at Noah, who was in front of him. What kind of ability is that? Is it an ability unique to the God Slayers? No. Noah said faintly. That's Draeger's ability. Draeger's ability. Chow Chow was stunned. The Red Dragon Emperor's ability. That's right. Noah nodded. Draeger's ability before he was sealed. Other than multiplication and transfer, it's the third ability. That's right. The third ability. After becoming a man-made artifact, Draeger mentioned that the third ability before his death had been reproduced penetration. It was an ability that could penetrate any defense, ignore the obstacles between the user and the target, and cause the user's attack to directly affect the opponent. Just now, Noah used this ability to let his attack pass through the General Treasure's defense and directly affect Chow Chow's body. Although the attack was weakened due to the previous stalemate, with Chow Chow's weak defense, it was enough to determine the outcome of the battle. But that's impossible. Other than multiplication and transfer, the Red Dragon Emperor doesn't have a third ability. Chow Chow immediately refuted, but then he thought of something. Could it be the ability of your subspecies Taming Hand? Just like how Chow Chow could obtain 7 different abilities by obtaining the subspecies Taming Hand, since Noah's Taming Hand was also a subspecies, it might have a different ability from the original. Chow Chow had been guarding against this, but he didn't expect to fall for it. Of course, Chow Chow didn't know that Noah's subspecies Taming Hand was no different from Draeger's original Taming Hand. They could both use multiplication and transfer at will, and did not need to follow the restriction of activating once every 10 seconds. However, because it reproduced the Taming Hand when it fused with the air scale, it became a subspecies Taming Hand. Noah's subspecies Taming Hand did indeed have the air scale ability, which increased its defense by a large margin. However, the subspecies Taming Hand only increased the air scale ability, not the penetration ability. The penetration ability was only Draeger's ability when he was alive, and now it was reproduced by the man-made artifact. Of course, it was very troublesome to explain, so Noah let Chow Chow guess. I've really been taken care of by you today. Noah lifted his feet and slowly walked towards Chow Chow. There was no warmth in his eyes. Kidnapping my student, seizing the power of Orpheus, I'll settle this score with you bit by bit. I haven't lost yet. Chow Chow suddenly coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood, but his eyes were more persistent than ever before. Since my Taming Hand has lost to yours, then you shall witness my tyrannical splendor. After saying that, Chow Chow suddenly raised his holy spear and pointed it at Noah. Spear, the true holy spear that pierces through the gods, absorbing the ideals of the overlord that hibernates in my body, delving into blessings and destruction. Thou, tell thy will, turn into radiance. Under Chow Chow's singing, the holy spear that killed the gods bloomed with a strong light. The light was different from the holy light that carried the holy attribute from before. It was filled with an indescribable power. Noah's eyes flashed, but he didn't stop. Instead, he also sang. Avesta, activate. Counteracted in turn. Simulate the star atlas, another cosmology. Dazzling starlight once again shone from Noah's body. Together with the crimson airwaves that covered Noah's body, it illuminated the whole world. Under the starlight, the strong light that bloomed from the holy spear suddenly trembled. Like melting snow, it dissipated little by little. What? Chow Chow turned pale with fright. Impossible. Nothing is impossible, Noah said indifferently. Although I don't know what kind of power you're going to use, since that power is called tyrannical splendor, it should be the power of the Overlord, right? Do you think that the power that comes from other sealed existences will work? Just like what Noah said, the Holy Spear also has the power of the Overlord. The Overlord that seals a dragon is called the Tyrant Dragon. The Overlord that seals a beast is called the Tyrant Beast. And within the Holy Spear, there is no power of dragons or beasts sealed. Instead, there is the will left behind by the God of the Bible. That is the Holy Spear's Overlord. The power that released the will of God is tyrannical splendor. When the holder of the Holy Spear uses tyrannical splendor, the will of God in the Holy Spear will absorb the ambition of the holder and respond to the will of the holder, giving birth to various effects and miracles. Sometimes, it is an overwhelming destructive power that can defeat the opponent. Sometimes, it is a binding ability that can restrict the opponent. But sometimes, it is a blessing for the opponent, making the user suffer the consequences of his own actions. That is the price to pay for the Holy Spear's Overlord. Although it is not as dangerous as the Tyrant Dragon, there is a lot of luck involved. Once an effect or ability that is beneficial to the opponent appears, the price to pay will be more terrible than the Tyrant Dragon. Therefore, unless there is no other way, even Chow Chow would not dare to use the power of tyrannical splendor. But in the current situation, even if Chow Chow used tyrannical splendor, it would be useless. It is not that tyrannical splendor did not work, but that the power of God's will was offset by Noah. If it is the power of an artifact, then it is fine. After all, an artifact can only be obtained by an existence with human blood and has a deep relationship with humans. My trump card is useless against the power of an artifact. But if it is the power of another existence that is sealed, as long as it is not the power of a human, then it is useless against me. Noah stood in front of Chow Chow, whose face was filled with disbelief, and looked down at him. So, General, Chow Chow. As soon as his voice fell. Bang! With a muffled sound, Noah kicked Chow Chow's chest. Poochie! Chow Chow once again spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew out and heavily smashed into a rock. His whole body was embedded in it. His skin was cut open and a large amount of blood sputtered out. In Chow Chow's hand, the holy spear that was powerful enough to kill a god slowly slid down. With a clang sound, it fell to the ground. The halo and sphere that were suspended behind Chow Chow completely disappeared. Tyrannical splendor was offset. The forbidden hand was lifted. Coupled with his serious injuries, Chow Chow was powerless to reverse the situation. At this point, the outcome was decided. Chapter 1887. The battlefield returned to its original silence. The corpses of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts were piled up, filling up the entire battlefield. Some of these Grim Reapers and demonic beasts were involved in the aftermath of the battle between Noah and Chow Chow, while the rest were all small fries that were dealt with by Wally's team. Wally, Black Song, Luffy, Arthur, Monkey, and Fenrir. With just these people, Wally's team was able to deal with enemies that were thousands or tens of thousands of times more than their own. Moreover, after dealing with a large number of enemies, including Luffy, who was the weakest, no one in Wally's team suffered any injuries. They were only somewhat exhausted. Of course, this exhaustion was not caused by the existence of the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts. Although there were many Grim Reapers and demonic beasts, no matter how many there were, they were just small fries. For Wally's team that had gathered all kinds of extraordinary existences, they were just small fries that could be dealt with in a short amount of time. The reason why they were exhausted was because Wally's team had to deal with the other members of the Heroes faction while dealing with the Grim Reapers and demonic beasts. Don't forget, besides Chow Chow, there were many capable people in the Heroes faction. For example, Siegfried. That guy was the descendant of the famous dragon slayer hero Siegfried. His strength was extraordinary, far from being comparable to those grim reapers and demonic beasts. However, this guy found Arthur, who had the strongest holy sword, as his opponent. In the end, he was defeated by the descendant of the Night King, who was the embodiment of coldness and cruelty when he entered the battle state. In addition, Galger and Leonardo were also very troublesome. One of them was the owner of Dimension Lost, while the other was the owner of Annihilation Maker. Both of them possessed one of the 4 highest-grade godly annihilation tools. Their level of difficulty was comparable to Siegfried's. Unfortunately, there were only a few existences like Cao Cao who could develop and use the power of divine annihilation tools to the extreme. They could even be called unique. Although Galger and Leonardo were also troublesome, they were still a long distance away from Cao Cao. In the end, they were taken down by Monkey and Fenrir without any suspense. As for the remaining members of the Heroes faction, although they had also inherited the bloodline of the Heroes and Bravehearts, they were still lacking compared to Wally's team. They were all taken down by Wally and Black Song. Although the Heroes faction wanted to use the Jamalni's family as hostages to retreat at the last moment, Noah was not the kind of person who would let the same method. Before the battle with Cao Cao, when he saved Orpheus from Samuel's dragon slaughter, Noah had asked Orpheus to save the Jimenez family after the battle started. The result was obvious. Even though Orpheus had lost half of his power, the remaining half of his power was enough to dominate all existences, allowing him to maintain his title as the strongest dragon god. Therefore, when the battle was in full swing, Orpheus had already saved the Jamalni's family. After losing all means, the Heroes faction completely gave up resistance and chose to surrender. Luffy engraved a sealing magic formation on their bodies and gathered them in the center of the battlefield. It had to be said that Wally and his team were not interested in anything other than fighting. After defeating the Heroes faction and ending the battle, they completely ignored Cao Cao and his team. They did not even want to deal with the aftermath. If not for Noah's request, perhaps they would have just left after the battle and would not care about what Cao Cao and his team did. In other words, Wally and his team were not interested in how to deal with the members of the Heroes faction. They were all members of the Team of Calamity. They left everything to Noah. Noah was also happy with this. After all, he had many things to ask the Heroes faction. After leaving the sleeping Jamalni family members in the care of his most trusted Luffy, Noah approached the group of Hero faction members who were paralyzed on the ground. Looking at Cao Cao, who was covered in wounds and leaning on his companion, Noah asked directly, "Where is the half of Orpheus' power that was taken away?" "We've teleported back to the headquarters of the Disaster Squad." Cao Cao was silent for a moment before replying with a blank expression. "There are people there in charge of receiving it, but they are not from the Hero faction. Instead, they are from the Technology Development Department. After receiving Orpheus' power, they will immediately use that power to create a new Orpheus and make the new Orpheus the leader of the Disaster Squad." In other words, the real Orpheus had been abandoned by Disaster. No, it should be said that from now on, the new Orpheus would be treated as the real Orpheus by the higher-ups of the Disaster Squad. Like a political puppet, he would be used to confuse those who did not know the truth and continue to maintain the existence of the Disaster Squad. The Disaster Group was a terrorist organization made up of many dangerous people, big and small. In order to make these restless fellows obedient, a leader with absolute deterrence was a must. The world's #1 dragon god was without a doubt the best choice. With the name of the infinite dragon god pressuring them, those dangerous people would all join the group of disasters and obediently listen to their orders. Not to mention, Orpheus, Snake, was the best bait to attract those madmen who were chasing after power. With it, the Disaster Squad could guarantee a steady stream of new members and ensure everyone's fighting power. After all, after swallowing Orpheus, Snake, even the weakest person would become at least comparable to a middle demon. But, from now on, the Disaster Squad will probably control the number of snakes given, right? Chow Chow said with unusual calmness. No matter what, although half of Orpheus' power is now divided into two, Orpheus' unlimited power will become limited. It will be impossible to provide a steady stream of snakes like before. Is that so? Noah continued to ask indifferently. Then where is the disaster squad's headquarters? I don't know, Chow Chow said directly. Don't think that I don't want to tell you, I really don't know. Noah frowned. As the biggest faction in the disaster squad and the leader of the heroes faction, how could Chow Chow not know where the disaster squad's headquarters was? However, Chow Chow's words did not sound like a lie. In the end, this question was answered by Wally. The disaster's main camp is located in a different dimension, and the coordinates of that dimension are constantly changing. Only by contacting the people from the R&D department in the main camp will they open the entrance and let us in. But the actions of every member in the disaster squad are under the surveillance of those guys. The news of our defeat has probably reached their ears, so it's impossible for them to open the entrance for us, right? Chow Chow said with a sarcastic expression. As for Wally and the others, because they took Orpheus without permission, they are now considered traitors. They can no longer return to the disaster squad, or rather, they are wanted by the disaster squad. Plus, the various mythological factions are also looking for them. Wally, your situation is worse than mine, right? It doesn't matter, Wally said matter-of-factly. I just need battles that can make people's blood boil. It doesn't matter which faction I join or act alone. As expected of you, Chow Chow said with a bitter smile. It's very similar to your answer. Ignoring Wally and Chow Chow's self-entertainment, Noah sighed. It seems that there is no way to regain the power that Orpheus lost. At this moment, Chow Chow suddenly spoke to Noah. You once said that I am not destined to be a hero. Noah raised his head and looked at Chow Chow. Chow Chow met Noah's gaze and said word by word. Why? Why? These three short words were enough to explain the confusion in Chow Chow's heart. In response, Noah said calmly. Because heroes are destined to defeat evil, not demons, demon kings, and demonic dragons. Chow Chow's expression changed slightly, and at the same time, he fell into silence. Noah turned around, no longer paying attention to Chow Chow, and looked around. Looking at the scene where the bodies of the Grim Reapers were mixed in with the bodies of the demonic beasts, Noah's eyes shone with a cold light. Hades. Chapter 1888. Today was destined to be an eventful day. At least, for those who were at the top of their respective mythical systems, today would be a busy day. Earlier on, under Noah's instructions, Asashel had contacted the main gods of various mythical systems. The purpose was to cancel the arrest warrant for Orpheus. As Asashel had expected, as soon as this matter was brought up, it was immediately opposed by all the mythical forces. If it was so easy to write off the sins committed in the past, then the world would be much more peaceful. In addition, each mythical force had their own thoughts, so the matter of canceling the arrest warrant for Orpheus was unsurprisingly opposed by everyone. However, Asashel was equally fearless. After bringing up Noah's statement, the reactions of the various mythical forces also appeared as expected. What kind of reaction? Anger. That was to be expected, right? Because, as Asashel had said, Noah's statement was not so much a request, but a threat. In this way, not to mention the gods with extremely high status and dignity, even an ordinary person would be angry, right? However, at the same time, the various mythical forces had to hesitate. After all, Orpheus was a major threat that no one could ignore. If Orpheus continued to provide the people of the disaster group with snakes, then this threat would still exist, and the losses of the various forces would continue to increase. If they could avoid the threat brought by Orpheus, no matter who it was, they would want to avoid it. In addition, the God Slayer, who had been in the limelight recently, was obviously on Orpheus's side. Once they refused to cancel the arrest warrant for Orpheus, it was hard to guarantee that the Godslayer would not be pushed to the side of the disaster group. At that time, an existence that could kill gods would become a terrorist, and it would be a greater threat than Orpheus. At least, Orpheus was only interested in the real Red Dragon Emperor, and would not attack the gods of the various mythical forces. Even if he provided the people of the disaster group with snakes, it was impossible for there to be someone who could kill gods with snakes, so the gods of the various mythical forces were still quite assured. But Noah was different. Although most of the gods still thought that it was a big joke for a human to be able to kill a god, and they snorted at it, there were still some gods who were skeptical. It was better to be safe than sorry. If such a thing really happened, what should they do? This was what those gods who had been thinking for a long time were thinking about. As a result, the matter of canceling the arrest warrant for Orpheus had been in a stalemate for a long time without any confirmation. Asashel was not in a hurry either. In any case, if this continued, in order to prevent serious casualties in their respective forces, the mythical forces would have to agree sooner or later. No matter how unwilling he was, it was the same. However, right at that moment, something unexpected happened. After getting in touch with Zazax, Asashel learned that Noah's group had been attacked. Although he was not sure who the attacker was, he knew without thinking that it could only be someone from the disaster squad. Under such circumstances, Asashel hurriedly prepared for a rescue. However, not long after the rescue operation began, Asashel received news that not only was Noah and company safe and sound, but they had also wiped out all the members of the hero faction. Asashel breathed a sigh of relief as he thought to himself, as expected of the Godslayer. Then, he hurriedly tried to contact Noah. However, before Asashel could contact Noah, Noah took the initiative to call and directly threw out such a sentence. Get all the main gods of the mythical forces to come to the underworld for a meeting. When this sentence pierced Asashel's ears, there was only one thought that came to Asashel's mind. This time, they had really gone too far. Due to the previous resolution on the arrest warrant for Orpheus, Asashel easily contacted the various mythical forces and asked each mythical force to send at least one representative to gather in the underworld. Although the various mythical forces were a little stunned and puzzled about this, after learning that the famous God Slayer would also attend the meeting, they immediately decided to come to the meeting one by one. These gods probably had the same idea as Odin previously. They wanted to see with their own eyes if the rumored God Slayer really had the ability to kill gods. Although some extremely xenophobic mythical forces were repulsed by the idea of contacting other mythical forces, in order to confirm this matter, no matter which mythical force it was, they all sent people to attend the meeting. Because they did not know if this meeting was the so-called Hongmen banquet, many mythical forces did not send their main gods in person. There were only 4 main gods who came to attend the meeting in person. One was the main god of Norse mythology Odin. One was the main god of Greek mythology Zeus. One was the god of destruction of the 3 main gods of Hinduism Shiva. The other was the highest ruling god of the 33 heavens of Mount Meru, the holy land that ruled almost all the gods and Buddhas in Buddhism Sakra. The reason why these main gods and gods came in person was that they each had their own ideas. Odin came in person because he had reached an agreement with the demons, angels, and fallen angels, so he did not suspect his allies. Zeus came in person because the Greek mythical forces had been in contact with the demons, angels, and fallen angels for a long time. He was not as vigilant as the other mythical forces, so he came in person. However, he still brought Poseidon and Hades. Shiva and Sakra were bold because of their skills. These 2 gods were, in fact, ranked in the top 10 in the world. The former's ranking was only below Orpheus. The latter had the title of the strongest god of war. One could imagine how powerful they were. Under such circumstances, in the center of Lilith, the capital of the underworld's demon king's territory, representatives of various mythological forces sat around a huge round table in a vast conference room in a magnificent building. With the four main gods leading their respective mythological gods as the leaders, the representatives of various mythological forces sat around a huge round table. Among them, the representative of the angels, Michael, and the four demon kings, who represented the demons, were also present. As the initiators of the meeting, Noah and Ithaziel arrived late. Katja, with a very soft sound of the door opening, the door of the conference room was opened. Outside the door, Noah and Ithaziel walked in one after another, attracting the attention of everyone present. In an instant, an extremely oppressive feeling filled the entire space of the conference room. The gods of various mythical systems all looked in one direction. The pressure was definitely enough to make an ordinary person's spirit collapse. Even Ithaziel felt like his heart was being fiercely squeezed, and his expression stiffened for a moment. Only Noah walked into the conference room without changing his expression. Under the gazes of all the gods present and the terrible pressure that filled the entire conference room, he looked around at all the gods, and his eyes stopped on one person. No, it could no longer be called a person. It was a skeleton. A skeleton without any flesh, wearing a luxurious robe like a priest, wearing a priest's hat, and holding a cane inlaid with a pitch-black pearl at the top. The skeleton naturally had no eyes, but a pair of eye sockets flashed with red light. Being stared at by that pair of eyes, even Noah had an illusion that the other party was not looking at him, but at his soul. It was very strange. Therefore, Noah could be sure. This guy was the god of the underworld in Greek mythology, Hades. In other words, the skeleton in front of him had made an agreement with the people of the hero sect and lent Samuel to the hero sect, causing Orpheus to lose half of his power. He was also the culprit who had brazenly sent the god of death, intending to seize Orpheus by force. The main reason why Noah called for this meeting was because of this guy. Come to think of it, Hades should have more or less expected this, but he still came here. He was probably not afraid at all. No matter what, like Shiva and Sakra, Hades was also one of the top 10 gods in the world. Therefore, Hades was not afraid at all. Under such circumstances, Noah calmly withdrew his gaze and followed Ithaziel to the main seat of the conference room. Ithaziel sat down next to him. Noah, on the other hand, was sitting in the main seat with his head held high. The atmosphere became more oppressive. Chapter 1889. Generally speaking, as the organizer of the conference, it was a matter of course for them to sit at the head of the table. However, it did not mean that just because they hosted a conference, they were qualified to sit at the head of the table. It depended on what kind of occasion it was. What kind of occasion was it now? The main gods and representatives of the various mythical forces that ruled this world were all present, and they sat down, ready to participate in this conference. In the end, a human was sitting at the head of the table, above the gods of all the forces. How could the atmosphere at the scene not become oppressive? At least, many of the representatives of the mythical forces looked at Noah with extremely sinister gazes, and they almost attacked him on the spot. The reason why they did not attack him on the spot was probably because he was a godslayer. Therefore, as the party that had reached a peace agreement with the demons, angels, and fallen angels, the main god of Norse mythology, Odin, looked at Noah curiously and was the first to speak, breaking the silence at the scene. You are the god slayer who has been rumored to be very powerful recently, right? The Norse main god who spoke was an extremely old man with a gray beard and a monocle on one eye. As the only ally of the demons, angels, and fallen angels at the scene, Odin had come here to look for Noah before reaching a peace agreement, intending to see for himself what kind of person the human known as the Godslayer was. Unfortunately, at that time, Noah was not in this world, causing Odin's plan to fall apart. However, it also gave Syzax and Issachel the opportunity to negotiate with the Norse main god and truly reach a peace agreement. Now that he had finally seen Noah with his own eyes, and he was also an ally of the demons, angels, and fallen angels, Odin was naturally the first to speak, breaking the silence and easing the oppressive atmosphere slightly. However, before Noah could answer, Sakra, the highest ruling god of Mount Meru, turned his gaze to Noah. Indescribable emotions fluctuated in his eyes as he said this. I have to say that you are very bold. A human actually dares to put the title of God-slayer on his head. Because of this, almost every mythical force has a god who regards you as a thorn in their side. Saying this, Sakra, who sounded like he was lamenting and sarcastic at the same time, was a brawny man with a string of Buddhist beads hanging around his neck and was a little slovenly. Although he looked so sloppy, this person was indeed Deshurtian, the leader of the gods and Buddhas, the king of the gods of Mount Meru, or Indra. However, the feeling that the Deshurtian in this world gave to Noah was completely different from the feeling that the Deshurtian in the box gave to Noah. The Deshurtian in the box court was a completely useless god. However, Noah could feel that Sakra's heart had a part of gentleness and love, making people feel that even if he was a cripple, he was still worthy of the name of Buddha. However, the feeling that the Deshurtian in this world gave to Noah wasn't the slightest bit in the aspect of gentleness and love of gods and Buddhas. Instead, he had a rather strong sense of existence in the aspect of martial gods. In addition, when he met the Deshurtian in the box court for the first time, that useless god had already descended from heaven to become a human, and the spirit of the king of gods was greatly suppressed. Therefore, the Deshurtian in this world was a lot stronger than the Deshurtian in the box court who descended from heaven to become a human. However, Noah still had a good impression of the Deshurtian in the box court. As for the Deshurtian in this world, Noah didn't have even the slightest bit of good impression. That sarcastic tone really made people a little angry. Thus, Noah also responded indifferently. There's no need for the famous king of gods and Buddhas to worry. Of course, if you want to protect me a little from those gods who see me as a thorn in their flesh, then that's another matter. No, I'm also a god and Buddha. In front of the great god Slayer, I'm just a prey to be killed. How can I protect you? Deshurtian laughed pretentiously. So, you'd better pray for yourself. This fellow was truly infuriating. Don't worry about him. Asashel lowered his voice and said to Noah. That guy is like this. His words are so unpleasant to hear. Moreover, the greater the threat to him, the more unpleasant his words are. I reckon that guy is also testing you. Don't fall into his trap. Even without Asashel's reminder, Noah knew that Deshurtian was actually deliberately provoking him. In terms of means, this approach wasn't very clever, but it was often very effective. Noah wouldn't be so easily provoked by others. After all, Noah's opponents were all the mythical powers present, not just a god and Buddha. I'll make it clear first. Noah ignored Deshurtian and looked around at all the gods present. I didn't ask you to attend this meeting because I wanted to play along with you. There's no need to sound each other out. If you have any doubts or dissatisfaction in your hearts, you can directly raise them here. When you're done, I'll talk about my matters. This sentence made all the gods present raise their eyebrows. The way they looked at Noah changed directly. Although Noah's speech was quite arrogant, such a straightforward showdown really caught all the gods off guard. Only one of the three Hindu gods, Shiva, the god of destruction, let out a laugh. Interesting. In the face of so many gods and Buddhas, you can still be so arrogant. This is the first time I've seen such a human. Just based on this point, no matter if you have really killed a god or not, you are qualified to be on equal footing with us. I'll acknowledge you. Shiva's words made all the gods present slightly change their expressions. No one dared to ignore the words of this god who looked to be only 14 or 15 years old and had very good facial features, just like an underage teenager. Among all the mythical powers, Indian mythology was one of the best. Not to mention others, just looking at the top 10 in the world, even famous mythical powers like Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and Celtic mythology only had one or two names that could enter the list. However, Indian mythology had a total of 3 people occupying the second, third, and fourth places below Orpheus. This situation could be seen. Among the 3 of them, Shiva was one of the strongest, just below Orpheus. Even if other than Orpheus, who was the undisputed first place, the rest were not ranked first. Shiva, who had the name of the god of destruction, was recognized as the strongest. At least, the dangerous aura that Noah's sensory ability feedback told him. Shiva was probably at the top of the 4-digit list. That was why the god of destruction was ranked second in the top 10 in the world. Since the god of destruction had acknowledged Noah, even if the other gods were not convinced, they had to shut their mouths. Zeus, the main god of Greek mythology, could not help but laugh. Since you are recognized by one of the 3 great gods of Hinduism and the god of destruction, little brother, you are really not simple. Zeus was an uncle with a crown on his head, a long robe on his body, and a full beard on his face. The moment the uncle spoke, he gave off a sense of intimacy. It was as if he was a familiar face, which made people wonder if he was the king of gods in Greek mythology. Noah could even hear Athena's unhappy voice in his mind. Annoying men, no matter which world they are in, are always so annoying. This reminded Noah that Zeus was Athena's enemy. Only the half-naked Poseidon, who was sitting next to Zeus, laughed out loud, which made Athena even more displeased. By the way, Poseidon was also Athena's enemy. Of course, it did not refer to this world. At this time, Hades finally spoke. So, great god slayer, what are you planning to do by gathering all the gods of the various mythological forces? As the initiator, Hades took the initiative to cut to the chase. Moreover, he said it in a joking tone. Undoubtedly, this guy knew everything, but he pretended not to know and was fearless. Noah glanced at Hades and immediately said something that stunned Hades. I have gathered you here mainly for 2 things. First, you should know that the demons, angels, and fallen angels are working hard to promote peace. They want to reach a peace agreement with the various mythological forces, but they have been unable to do so for a long time. So, I hope that you can give me an answer here. Chapter 1890. WH. What? Hearing Noah's words, all the gods present were really stunned. Not to mention the gods of the various mythical forces, even the representatives of the demons, angels, and fallen angels such as Asashel, Zazax, and Michael were stunned and then became anxious. Noah! Asashel said in shock. You, without giving Asashel a chance to speak, Noah directly stretched out his hand and blocked all of Asashel's words. I know, this kind of thing can't be rushed. Whether to cooperate or not is not something that can be decided so rashly. Moreover, almost all the mythical forces are very xenophobic. They won't easily decide to conclude a peace treaty, let alone have a showdown on such an occasion. That will directly block this road and will only make things worse. Noah said this as if he didn't realize that the main gods and representatives of the various mythical forces were present. But, I'm impatient. With such a sentence, Noah stood up, and his gaze pierced all the gods present like a sharp sword. I'm a teacher in a school in the human world. Although I'm not responsible for teaching, I have a few demon students. Our relationship with each other is not bad. I also have some friendship with them, and even with their families. Noah's sudden narration directly made the gods of the various mythical forces look at each other. This human, at this time, what was he planning to do by saying this kind of thing? Noah ignored the doubts of all the gods present and continued to speak. Although they are all demons, they enjoy life in the human world. Even if they are attacked by terrorist groups like the Disaster Group, they still work hard to maintain this kind of daily life and fight without telling everyone. As a human, this makes me very gratified. Zazax and Seraphil, who knew who Noah was talking about, were silent. This was because the 2 demon kings' younger sisters were among the students that Noah mentioned. At that moment, Noah's tone changed all of a sudden. Not long ago, we were attacked by the disaster group again. This time, it was the biggest faction in the disaster group, the hero faction. Their strength is very strong. At least, my students who haven't grown up are definitely not their opponents. As a result, they were reduced to hostages and used to threaten me with the purpose of seizing the power of Orpheus. Seizing the power of Orpheus. The gods were shocked. Even Shiva, Odin, Zeus, Poseidon, and Sakra narrowed their eyes slightly, as if they were thinking about something. Only Hades said pretentiously. A group of terrorists actually have the idea of seizing the infinite dragon god. There are also many people who don't care about their lives among humans. Although there are some people who overestimate themselves among humans, not all of them are idiots. The hero faction dared to have the idea of seizing Orpheus, so they naturally have something to rely on, Noah said faintly. And their reliance is the help provided by some gods who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces. The reason is that they hate demons and fallen angels, which are so boring that people can't help but want to laugh. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became stiff. Especially Hades. Under Noah's obviously contemptuous words, the red light in his eye sockets became brighter. However, Noah didn't expose Hades in front of him, but said this. I know that there are actually many gods who are as boring as this. Almost every mythical force has gods who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces. Loki of Northern Europe is one of them. This time, the guy who played some dirty tricks behind my back is also one of them. If it were in the past, I wouldn't be so free and elegant to meddle in other people's business and intervene in the affairs of various mythical forces. After all, I'm just a human. Noah curled his lips and smiled. However, the actions of the people of the hero faction also tell me that as long as this matter is not finalized, those boring guys who don't want to see their own mythical forces come into contact with other mythical forces will keep jumping around. That's really too endless. Under such circumstances, if my lovely students are involved in a boring dispute one day. Noah looked around at all the gods present. His voice was like a sharp knife, instantly piercing into the hearts of all the gods. I'm afraid that I won't be able to hold back and slaughter all the gods who are jumping around in the dark together with their entire mythical forces. As soon as his voice fell, almost all the gods present suddenly stood up from their seats. Their whole bodies surged with a terrifying aura as they stared at Noah, their eyes full of anger. Even Shiva, Odin, Zeus, Poseidon, and Sakra's faces sank as they slowly stood up. Kid, Sakra said sarcastically. Don't you think that you're a bit too arrogant? Young man, I know that you are very angry about your students being attacked, but some words are destined not to be said carelessly, Odin advised. Otherwise, it will spoil things. Although I admit that you are very courageous, I have to say that as long as they are gods, they can't pretend that they didn't hear your words. Shiva shrugged. Do you think that you alone can deal with all the gods of the mythological forces present here? We can totally understand that. You didn't get it wrong, Noah said indifferently. That's what I think. The atmosphere in the air suddenly became cold. At this moment, all the gods of the mythical forces, except for Odin, who was their ally, cast indifferent, angry, contemptuous, and disdainful looks at Noah. Their expressions were extremely ugly. Ha 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 ha. Hades couldn't help but laugh. I thought that the legendary god slayer was so great, but it turns out that he is just an ignorant kid. How ironic. Asashel, Syzax, Seraph, Michael, and the other demons, angels, and fallen angels all showed bitter expressions. Because they knew that things had developed to a point where they couldn't be saved. Under such circumstances, Noah didn't seem to understand the current situation at all and spoke expressionlessly. In short, in order to prevent some rats from jumping around in the dark, I hope that everyone will give an answer here. Do you want to conclude a peace treaty with the demons, angels, and fallen angels? I am willing to be a witness and preside over your peace treaty. In the future, if someone violates the peace treaty, I will personally take action and annihilate him. If you don't want to conclude a peace treaty, in the future, if the gods of the mythical forces you belong to play tricks, I will make that mythical force disappear completely. His unceremonious speech made all the gods furious. Even Odin sighed and shook his head. As for Asashel, Sazax, Michael, and the others, the bitterness on their faces was even stronger. Noah, who would be willing to conclude a peace treaty after hearing what you said? Wouldn't that be tantamount to directly admitting that they were afraid of you? How could this matter still be resolved after offending all the mythical forces? This time, it was really over. However, at this moment, Noah's tone changed again. Of course, everyone can wait for a while before giving an answer. Wait until I resolve the second thing I want to say. With that said, Noah ignored all the gods present and turned to look at Hades. That gaze was no longer as sharp as a sword as before. Instead, it was as cold as ice, incomparably cold. Hades, the god of the underworld, one of the top 10 in the world. In order to obtain Orpheus, you did not hesitate to lend Samuel to the heroes and even brazenly send out the Grim Reaper. Do you really think that no one dares to do anything to you? The moment Noah said this, a crimson gauntlet appeared in Noah's hand. Balance breaker. The gauntlet suddenly exploded and turned into a crimson wave that covered Noah's entire body. Boom! In the center of Lilith, the capital of the Demon King's territory, the top of an extremely magnificent building suddenly exploded. With a deafening roar, it exploded, causing an astonishing impact. Chapter 1891. Kaboom! The explosion that resounded through the clouds caused the entire top of the magnificent building to be blown away, setting off a powerful impact and a dense flame. It was like a huge firework blooming in the air, quite pleasing to the eye. Pieces of gravel and rubble fell from the sky in the explosion like scattered flowers, and fell to the ground in a burst of a crackling sound. The sudden explosion and movement startled all the demons in Lilith, the capital of the Demon King's territory. What's wrong? What happened? Why did it suddenly explode? Could it be that the group of calamities attacked the underworld? Uproar and panic spread throughout the capital of Lilith. In this aspect, their reaction was no different from that of humans. After all, it could be seen from the scale of the explosion that it was not a scene that ordinary demons could deal with. Without the strength of a superior demon, being affected by the explosion would probably cause one to be smashed into pieces. It was precisely because of their strength that the demons could understand what the explosion meant. Therefore, uproar and panic were inevitable. Until a certain moment, a sharp-eyed demon discovered something and pointed to the sky. Look over there. There's someone there. This involuntary shout immediately attracted the attention of the surrounding demons to the sky. Only then did the group of demons discover something. At the top of the magnificent building that exploded, in the intense flames, a group of people flew out one after another. The first to fly out were two people. Because of the height, even with the demons' eyesight, they could still only see a blurry shadow. However, above the two blurry shadows, one was vibrating with a crimson dragon-shaped airwave all over his body, while the other was fluctuating with a dark shadow of death all over his body. This was clearly seen by the crowd of demons. However, it was precisely because they saw it clearly that the demons in the capital of Lilith all held their breaths. Because, from the two figures, a terrifying pressure that was enough to destroy heaven and earth spread out and shrouded down, causing the faces of the demons to begin to turn pale. What's more, even the shadows that flew out from the center of the explosion carried an extremely terrifying aura, causing the hearts of the demons to begin to tremble. In the sky, Noah and Hades were facing each other with a distance between them. Noah's expression was like an ancient well without any ripples. Hades was just a skeleton without any expression at all, but the red light in his pair of eye sockets was like a burning anger, constantly rising. After that, Hades' deep voice rang out. Do you want to die? Human. That voice was as if it could drill deep into one's soul. It was terrifying. Unfortunately, Noah acted as though he did not feel anything and mocked him. It seems that you really think that even if you attack us and wallow in the mire with those guys from the heroes faction, no one will do anything to you, skeleton. I don't know what you're talking about. Hades' voice was still low, but he began to play dumb. You're saying that I'm wallowing in the mire with the people from the disaster faction. Do you have any evidence? Obviously, Hades had long expected that he would definitely be held responsible. He even prepared an excuse. However, Hades did not expect that Noah would actually interrogate him after attacking him. Moreover, Noah did not fall for Hades' trick at all. Evidence. Don't tell me you've made a mistake. What evidence do I need to show? Noah laughed. Don't tell me you think that I intend to expose your actions and let the various mythological factions convict you. Saying such a sentence, Noah's expression became indifferent. Stop joking. Since I know that you did it, that's enough. Your crime will be judged by me. Convict me. A mere human actually wants to convict a god. Hades laughed angrily. Interesting, it's really interesting. In the past, I've always convicted the dead humans. No human has ever convicted me. God Slayer, you're crazy enough. I'd like to see how you're going to convict me. After saying that, Hades' whole body swelled with thick darkness as if he was shrouded by the shadow of death. It was like a dark flame burning, instantly swallowing the light in the entire space. God Slayer, let me see how you can kill a god. The orb at the top of the staff that Hades held tightly in his hand bloomed with light. Suddenly, the thick darkness that covered the entire space suddenly trembled and boiled like magma. With a tumble, it carried a terrifying wave of death. It was like black water falling from the sky, covering the direction where Noah was. The representatives of the demons, angels, and fallen angels, such as Sazax, Seraph, Asashel, and Michael, who were preparing to stop Noah and Hades, were shocked when they saw this scene. Not good. Sazax shouted. If such an attack falls, all the residents in the city will have their souls taken away and be directly taken into the underworld. That bastard. Asashel was angry. He didn't even consider what would happen to the ordinary residents in the city. It's better to say that he simply intends to use this opportunity to make a scene in the demons' territory. The main reason why Hades helped the heroes was that he didn't want to see his own mythical forces come into contact with the mythical forces of the Bible. This was because Hades hated demons and fallen angels very much. Demons and fallen angels lived in the underworld. The underworld that Hades controlled was located below the underworld. It was as if he was being crushed by a devil and a fallen angel. Therefore, Hades hated demons and fallen angels. If he could make a scene in the underworld and cut off a piece of the demon's flesh, Hades would definitely be happy. After that, he only needed to push the blame to Noah, who took the initiative to attack, and Hades could happily watch Sazax and Asashel swallow their anger. In view of this, Hades did not show any mercy when he attacked. The attack range had already enveloped several cities around the Demon King's territory, including the capital, Lilith. The attack range of one of the top 10 powerhouses in the world included an entire huge city. At this moment, all the demons could only watch the darkness pouring down from the sky, and they were all stunned on the spot. Seeing the scene as if the entire dark sky was collapsing, Sazax, Seraph, Asashel, and the others could not help but feel anxious. At this moment, under the dark sky that seemed to be collapsing, a ray of starlight lit up. Avesta activated Dash. Amidst the starlight, a voice that seemed to echo from the distant horizon rang out. Counteract it one by one. Simulating another cosmology. The bright starlight suddenly turned into a gorgeous Milky Way that soared into the sky. It expanded and surged in all directions like a tide, covering the entire space in an instant. Under the gorgeous starlight, the death power that was like the dark sky was like a flame that touched water. It trembled and quickly disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye. Boom! In the end, the disintegrating thick darkness directly exploded and dissipated in the air like scattered black clouds. What? Hades finally got up in shock. At the same time, a crimson figure silently appeared in front of Hades. The moment the crimson light in Hades's eye sockets fluctuated violently, he raised his head and exposed a pair of deep, dark eyes to Hades. Then let me tell you why I killed a god. Amidst the crimson waves of air, a burst of dense darkness suddenly burst forth. The darkness was exactly the same as the death power that Hades controlled. Immediately after, Noah clenched his fist, which was mixed with a red airwave and dense darkness, and like a falling meteorite, he slammed it heavily in front of Hades. Boom! A deafening muffled sound resounded. Chapter 1892. Boom! When the thunder-like sound suddenly appeared in the sky, a circle of shock waves that scattered the clouds high above suddenly shook and spread to the surroundings. The entire atmosphere was suddenly cleared, and there was a temporary vacuum phenomenon. Whoosh! Immediately, in a sharp sound, a black shadow fell from the sky like a meteorite falling from the sky, with some flames fluctuating on its outline. Under the gaze of all the demons in the capital of Lilith, it crossed the sky and fell straight into the wilderness outside the city. Boom! The next second, the ground shook, and a mushroom cloud of dust rose in the wilderness outside the capital of the Demon King's territory, Lilith, as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. That scene made all the fiends' complexions turn pale in an instant. If such an impact fell in Lilith, what would happen to them, who were still in Lilith? At the thought of this, all the demons felt an uncontrollable fear rising in their hearts. In the wilderness outside the capital of Lilith, in the meteorite crater where a mushroom cloud of dust rose, Hades, who was still fluctuating with the darkness of the shadow of death, stood up with difficulty. However, Hades didn't notice. Behind him, a figure that was mixed with crimson air waves and dense darkness silently appeared once again. Then, the figure slowly raised a foot, and at the moment when Hades was about to struggle to get up, the figure fell heavily like a heavy mountain. Boom! With a muffled bang, the ground of the entire wilderness suddenly shook and collapsed like an avalanche. It gave rise to a terrifying impact like a storm in dense sand and dust, causing countless rocks and debris to flutter about and scatter in all directions. Aw, 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 aw. Hades' screams resounded from the huge meteorite crater. The screams made the hearts of the gods and representatives of the various mythical powers, who were flying at high speed, tremble. It wasn't until the violent impact and thick dust that permeated the whole world below slowly dissipated that the situation inside was exposed to everyone's eyes, that the gods saw it. In the center of the meteorite crater, in the center of the ground, where cracks spread like a spider web, Noah, who was fluctuating with red air waves and rich darkness, was standing there. As for Hades, he was lying in front of Noah, screaming and struggling, but he couldn't get up at all. Because, on Hades' body, one of Noah's feet was fiercely stepping on him, and the power it carried was so strong that Hades couldn't resist it at all. Noah kept exerting force, and there were cracking sounds on Hades' body, as if something was breaking. Aw, 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 aw. With Noah's constant exertion of force, Hades' screams reverberated uncontrollably. The screams were like ferocious ghosts and ferocious beasts, which made the gods of mythical powers tremble in their hearts. Finally, shock appeared in their eyes. Who was Hades? Not to mention his status in Greek mythology, just in terms of strength, the god of the underworld occupied a place among the top 10 masters in the world. Now, one of the top 10 masters in the world was being trampled under the foot of a human being like a dog. Was this a joke? Not to mention the gods of the mythical powers, Even the representatives of demons, angels, and fallen angels, such as Fictional, Asashel, and Michael, who knew that Noah had power comparable to that of Orpheus to a certain extent, couldn't help but be shocked. Indeed, because of their good relationship with Noah, Fictional, Asashel, and the others all knew that Noah was powerful. However, from the time Noah suddenly attacked Hades, to the time when Hades was trampled under the foot of Noah and couldn't turn over, how long had it been? Was it a minute? Probably not, right? As a result, in less than a minute, one of the top 10 gods in the world was mercilessly trampled under the foot of Noah. How could this not make people feel shocked? As for Odin, Shiva, and Sakra, they saw more. Odin narrowed his eyes and stared at Noah as he said, "If my eyes aren't blurred, I shouldn't have seen wrongly, right? The power fluctuating on the body of the god Slayer, that's the power of God, right?" "That's right." Shiva stared closely at the thick darkness mixed in the crimson waves on Noah's body and whispered, "And that power is very familiar." "Are you kidding?" The sarcastic expression on Sakra's face had long disappeared and was replaced by a deep frown. "That guy, why is he using the power of Hades?" "Yes." Noah was using the power of Hades. The thick darkness was the power of death of Hades, the god of the underworld. If an ordinary person came into contact with it, they would immediately turn into a corpse. Their vitality would be completely wiped out, and even their soul could be annihilated. Now, this power that belonged to Hades was being used by Noah, a human. How? How is this possible? Hades roared in disbelief. "Why are you using my power?" Noah looked down at Hades with an expressionless face as he slowly increased the strength of his foot. "Ah!" Hades once again let out a blood-curdling scream, and the bones in his body began to make a ggggg sound. "So it turns out that you can still feel pain without flesh and only bones," Noah said sarcastically. "Do you want to know why I have your power? Then let me tell you." With such a sentence, Noah raised one of his hands. His hand was not only fluctuating with red waves of air and thick darkness, but also a gorgeous layer of starlight. "This is the power called another cosmology," Noah said faintly. "Its effect is very simple. It can add the opponent's power, ability, and even all the performance of the opponent to the user, so that the user can obtain all the strength of the opponent, and can also be used to offset the opponent's power. Your power will become mine during the time you are my opponent." This sentence not only made the gods of the myths widen their eyes, but also made the pupils of Shiva and Sakra, who were also in the top 10 of the world, shrink. The ability to obtain all the power of the opponent. Impossible! Hades shouted in horror. How could there be such a terrible power? Of course, this power is not omnipotent. It does not work on humans. Even if it is a mixed blood with a human, or a power with a deep relationship with a human, it will not work at all. However, as long as the opponent is not a human, but a god like you, then the stronger you are, the stronger I will be. No matter how many of you there are, it will only make my power stronger, and I will never be below you. Noah looked at Hades as if he was looking down on him. "Now, do you know why I can kill a god?" "Impossible. Impossible. Impossible." Hades muttered to himself as if he was possessed. How could a human have such an ability? How could it be? Not only did Hades not believe it, but the gods of the myths were also not willing to believe it. However, at the same time, all the gods present understood. "I see." Shiva's eyes flashed with a terrifying light. Is this why he dared to boast about wiping out all the myths by himself? As long as that ability existed, then, unless the opponent was a human, there was absolutely no possibility of defeating Noah. Therefore, even if the enemy was all the mythical powers, that human dared to say that he would kill all the gods. Therefore, a mere human dared to call himself a god slayer. Gods were absolutely unable to defeat this human. Understanding this point, all the gods present were alarmed and frightened. Do you understand? Lord God of the underworld. Noah's eyes flashed with a cold light. You should really regret attacking us. After saying this, murderous intent rose from Noah's body. Chapter 1893. The murderous aura that rose from Noah's body directly stimulated Hades, who seemed to be in a trance. You want to kill me? Hades said in disbelief. That was to be expected. Not to mention the consequences of killing Hades, just the fact that he would be killed was something that Hades could not accept. It wasn't that Hades was afraid of death. As the god of the underworld, as the god in charge of death and souls, death was definitely not something to be afraid of for Hades. However, before this, Hades had never thought that he would die. He had lent Samuel to the hero sect and coveted Orpheus. He had even sent the Grim Reaper's army to snatch Orpheus, who had lost half of his strength. Since Hades dared to do these things, he definitely had thought of the consequences of his actions. First of all, Samuel was sealed by the entire Greek mythology and was then handed over to Hades to manage. If Hades released Samuel without authorization and let Samuel's power appear in the world, the gods of Greek mythology would punish Hades for this alone. The heroes were the terrorists of the disaster group and were now the common enemy of all the mythical forces. Not only had Hades lent Samuel out without permission, but he had also lent Samuel to the terrorists of the disaster squad. Not to mention the Greek mythology, all the mythology forces had the right to pursue Hades's responsibility and make him suffer. However, Hades was not afraid. Because there was no evidence, right? Even if this matter was exposed, Hades had a way to avoid it. He believed that under the prestige of the top 10 powerhouses in the world, there were definitely not many who would really want to offend Hades. Therefore, even if the matter was exposed in the end, the excuse he found would be useless. At most, Hades would be punished. It was more likely that the big matter would be reduced to a small matter. In the end, nothing would happen at all. Even if it was the demons who had been sent by the heroes to attack them, considering that it was a critical moment for them to come into contact with Greek mythology and that they needed to fight for an opportunity to conclude a peace treaty, they would choose to swallow their anger. They would not do something as hurtful as holding the heroes accountable, which would not benefit them in any way, right? It was precisely because of these factors that Hades was fearless and not worried at all. But now, Noah's appearance had directly shattered Hades's wishful thinking. How dare he attack Hades so rudely and unreasonably, even intending to kill him? How could Hades, who wasn't worried about this matter in the first place, accept this result? Immediately, Hades cried out in panic. Zeus! Poseidon! Aren't you going to save me? One of the top 10 powerhouses in the world had actually asked for help. In the sky, Zeus and Poseidon, who were mingling among the gods of the myths, looked at each other and laughed bitterly. Zeus, Hades, Poseidon. In Greek mythology, the three of them were brothers. Moreover, they were blood brothers. Among them, Hades was the eldest, Poseidon was the second, and Zeus was the youngest. The three of them ruled the underworld, the sea, and the sky respectively. They were called Hades, Poseidon, and Father of the Heavens. Although in Greek mythology, Zeus, who was the youngest, was the king of the gods, in terms of strength, Hades was the first. There was no doubt that he was the first in Greek mythology. In addition, Noah was their blood brother. Whether it was for public or private reasons, Zeus and Poseidon couldn't just watch Hades be killed by Noah. Originally, he thought that with Noah's arrogant words, he would definitely suffer a big loss or even lose his life after facing Hades. Who knew that the result was that Hades would be abused like a dog? Therefore, it was not that Zeus and Poseidon didn't help, but they were stunned. Now that they had reacted, they couldn't continue to watch in a daze. Little brother, if my brother has offended you in any way, please please forgive him," Zeus said quickly. "Isn't there a saying that adults are magnanimous? You must be an adult, right? Anyway, you've already taught him a lesson, haven't you?" Poseidon laughed bitterly. "How about we just let him go?" As they said that, Zeus and Poseidon kept winking at Syzax and Asashel. Obviously, the two wanted Syzax and Asashel, who had a better relationship with Noah, to plead for Hades. However, Hades had clearly seen Zeus and Poseidon's little trick. Before Syzax and Asashel could say anything, Hades was enraged. What did Hades hate the most? Demons and fallen angels. Now, it was embarrassing enough to ask his brothers for help. How could he let the leaders of the demons and fallen angels, whom he hated the most, plead for him? That kind of thing was absolutely impossible. What nonsense are you still talking about? Hades was furious. This human brat doesn't take us gods seriously at all. Are you going to bow down to him? Don't tell me you're afraid of the power called another cosmology. Hades roared angrily. That kind of power can't exist in this world. Even if it does, it can't be obtained by a human. He's just talking big. Rather than saying this to others, it would be better to say that he was saying this to himself. Hades was not willing to believe that Noah had such a terrible power. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Hades's roar resounded through the sky. I don't believe it. In the midst of his roar, Hades's whole body surged with a terrible aura, setting off a violent wind that made the whole ground begin to tremble. Buzz, 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 buzz. The pitch-black power of death turned into a frantically surging fog that rose from Hades's body. The black gas seemed to be like the faces of people struggling in pain, and it let out a sharp wail that sounded like a wail. The hair-raising aura and scene made many gods present feel a chill in their hearts. However, Noah only glanced at this scene, and the foot that was stepping on Hades suddenly tightened. Clang! Another cosmology of starlight, named Avesta, shone from Noah's body and surged towards Hades' direction. Chi, 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 chi. All of a sudden, amidst the strange sounds that sounded like ice melting, the power of death that surged from Hades's body seemed to have been dispelled by the light, vanishing without a trace. Hades, who was emitting a terrifying aura like that of a ghost, instantly returned to his harmless appearance. Gotcha! At the next moment, along with a crisp sound, the few bones in front of Hades were crushed by Noah's stomp. Ah! An unprecedentedly strong cry of agony came from Hades's mouth. Stop! Zeus and Poseidon finally couldn't stand it anymore. They rushed out and rushed in Noah's direction. Come on! Noah raised his head and looked at Zeus and Poseidon, who were rushing toward him from midair. His eyes were full of fighting spirit. Let me see just how powerful the three main gods of Greek mythology are. The crimson waves of air that were fluctuating around Noah's body completely disappeared. Noah had cancelled his forbidden hand. However, Zeus and Poseidon's attacks made Avesta regard them as enemies. The starlight of another cosmology shone on Noah's body. Then, the power of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, the three most famous gods in Greek mythology, flowed into Noah's body, making Noah's body surge with a terrifying aura. Ha! With a violent shout, Noah suddenly released all the power in his body. Suddenly, violent thunderbolts, turbulent waves, and ominous black gas all shook from Noah's body and exploded in all directions as if they were going to destroy the heavens and the earth. Roar, roar, roar. Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon roared at the same time. A bolt of lightning appeared in Zeus's hand, a staff in Poseidon's hand, and a trident in Poseidon's hand. Lightning, black gas, and waves surged out of their bodies as they charged forward. Boom! An astonishing roar resounded through the sky. Chapter 1894. Boom! The roar that resounded through the sky turned into a sound wave that vibrated in all directions. The gods of the myths felt as if they had been hit by a heavy hammer. Their bodies trembled, and their eardrums were stinging. In the center of the field, the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the ominous black gas were divided into two camps and collided with each other. For a moment, the scene of the apocalypse was really brewing. Bang, 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 bang. Thunderbolts smashed down from the sky one after another and exploded the ground one after another. Boom! The waves raged wildly like stormy waves. In an instant, they submerged the land and turned it into an ocean. Chi, 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 chi. The power of death, which was enough to annihilate people's souls, filled the air like a black fog. The atmosphere seemed to be corroded, and there were bursts of evaporation sounds. Under the gaze of all the gods of the mythological forces, the thunderbolts, waves, and black gas in the collision rendered the whole wilderness like a storm in the dark night. Whether it was the scene or the momentum, it was enough to make the gods feel aghast. Of course, the more shocking thing was yet to come. Bang! In a muffled explosion, 3 figures flew out from the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the tumbling black gas. Immediately, Noah's voice sounded. "What's wrong? Is this all you've got?" Then, in the center of the collision of the violent thunderbolts, the turbulent waves, and the ominous black gas, a streamer burst out and rushed into the sky. The body of the flowing light was naturally Noah. As Noah flew into the sky, he raised one of his hands high, and there were bursts of thunderbolts in his hand. Another cosmology that could imitate all the power of the opponent and superimpose it on himself allowed Noah to obtain the power of Zeus, the Greek god who controlled the sky. He could control thunderbolts at will. Not only that, but Noah also mixed Hades' power of death into the lightning, turning the violent lightning into a pitch-black color and exploding in his hand. Thus, the scene of pitch-black thunderbolts falling from the sky was imprinted in the eyes of all the gods present. Bastard! Hades clutched his broken sternum, his eyes glinting fiercely. The death energy on his body fluctuated even more violently. Under Hades' control, it turned into a black wave that covered an area of a few kilometers and surged into the sky. My power can be used like this. Zeus was slightly taken aback, but he didn't dare to be careless. He thrust the lightning spear in his hand forward, and immediately released a thunderbolt that rushed upward. Boom! The shocking roar resounded again, and the faces of the gods of the various mythological powers began to change. The power of Noah, Zeus, and Hades, who suddenly collided in mid-air, exploded like a star exploding, causing a strong light that was enough to burn people's eyes. It was mixed with a terrible shock wave that swept out in all directions. Under the dazzling light and terrible shock wave, the gods of the various mythological powers retreated again and again, almost retreating to the sky above the capital, Lilith. However, all the gods still saw it. Under the dazzling light and terrible shock wave, the sea that submerged the surrounding area suddenly surged up like a monstrous wave and rushed toward the sky. The scale of the wave was larger than the thunderbolt released by Zeus and the vast black wave released by Hades. At the forefront of the wave, Poseidon, who was holding a golden trident, rushed toward the sky bravely, as if he was riding the wind and breaking the waves. God Slayer! You can also take my trident. Poseidon laughed. Riding the surging waves, he rushed toward Noah without fear. The trident in his hand seemed to carry the entire sea, fluctuating with strong water vapor, and he swung it heavily in the direction of Noah. In response, Noah clenched his fist tightly, and thick water vapor fluctuated on his fist. It was as if the entire ocean was compressed in his palm, and he blasted it towards the trident that was swinging towards him without any fancy moves. Dong! Accompanied by the collision of the fist and the trident, a heavy sound of collision rang out, and a stormy wave suddenly appeared in mid-air, filling the whole world with sea water in an instant. At the same time, Zeus and Hades suddenly appeared on both sides of Noah. One held a thunderbolt, the other a law enforcement staff, and they both stabbed fiercely toward Noah. In the blink of an eye, violent lightning and ominous black gas erupted from the bodies of Zeus and Hades. The three most famous gods in Greek mythology surrounded Noah in a triangular formation. One was like the incarnation of thunder, one was like the incarnation of the sea, and the last one was simply the incarnation of death. They attacked Noah together. Roar! 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 In the roar, the three main gods of Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, respectively, rushed toward Noah with violent thunderbolts, shocking waves, and black gas of death. Go away! Noah shouted in a low voice. Not only did the another cosmology operate at full power, but even the third perpetual motion machine was fully activated. All the power turned into a pure shock wave that shook from his body. This shock wave of pure power directly dispersed the thunderbolts, turbulent waves, and surging black gas that filled the sky. Immediately, the three gods, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, were all hit by the terrible power wave. Boom! A deafening muffled sound resounded through the clouds. Poochie! Zeus and Poseidon spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Crack! A few more of Hades's bones were broken. The three main gods of Greek mythology were suddenly seriously injured. They fell from the sky and smashed into the ground. It was only at this moment that the violent thunderbolts, waves, and black gas in the sky gradually dissipated, causing the apocalyptic scene to disappear completely. It was as if nothing had happened. However, looking at the three main gods of Greek mythology lying on the ground and moaning in grief, the gods of the mythological forces present were completely speechless. Looking at Noah, who was suspended in the air and still shining with brilliant starlight, all the gods' minds were blank. In just a few moves, the three most famous gods of Greek mythology had been defeated by Noah. Was this the power of a god-slayer? Ignoring the shock in the hearts of the gods present, Noah lowered his head and looked at Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon lying on the ground. His eyes flashed, and he suddenly descended and landed in front of Hades. You! Hades' heart trembled, and he spoke in a trembling voice without hesitation. You can't kill me. I am the god of the underworld. If I die, there will be no one to manage the underworld. The souls of the dead in the human world will have nowhere to go, and the human world will be in complete chaos. Is that so? Noah said lightly. Don't worry, I have no intention of killing you. You're the god who controls death. To you, death is not even worth mentioning. I've been thinking about how to teach you an unforgettable lesson. Since you've mentioned the matter of managing the underworld, that's perfect. I'll seal you in the underworld forever and you'll never be able to take half a step out of it. From now on, you can focus on managing the underworld. What? Hades said in disbelief. You want to seal me? Seal a god? Are you trying to say that I can't do it? Noah curled his lips and smiled. Unfortunately, I don't only have the another cosmology. In addition to the another cosmology that can imitate the power of objects other than humans, I also have another cosmology that can ignore any situation and seal natural gods. The red light in Hades' eye sockets trembled violently. In the next moment, without any hesitation, Hades abruptly turned around and rushed to the other side of the sky. Chapter 1895. It could seal the strongest species other than the pure-blooded dragon species into the fictional world, and it could only exert a having effect on the existence of the strongest species. However, as long as the natural gods and the elves of the planet were the opponents, they could overcome all the differences in strength and win. That was the virtual star Tice way. In the face of the natural gods and the elves of the planet, the absolutely invincible simulated star Atlas, another cosmology. This simulated star atlas, another cosmology, had not been used for a long time. After all, except for the box court, in other worlds, there were basically no existences like the gods and the elves. Even in the world of the god Slayer, because the disobedient gods were individuals born from myths and legends, it would be better to say that they were spirits born from the stars of heaven and earth rather than gods. Therefore, the simulated star atlas, another cosmology, named Su Xing Tai Sui, still could not be put to use. Of course, in addition to the gods and the elves, this simulated star atlas, another cosmology, could also exert a having effect even if it was used on other races. Its ability could not be said to be not powerful. In the beginning, in the box court, Noah relied on this simulated star atlas, another cosmology, to complete the miracle of sealing millions of gods in one fell swoop. It could be imagined how powerful this simulated star atlas, another cosmology, was. Unfortunately, apart from Hakata, in other worlds, there was no such thing as a spirit core. Therefore, the simulated star atlas, another cosmology, called the virtual star Tai Sui had never been used in the world outside the box court, and it had been sealed by Noah for a long time. However, now it was finally time for this simulated star atlas, another cosmology, to shine again. The gods in this world were not like the gods in the world of the god Slayer. They were like illusory spirits. Instead, they were real gods that were recorded in all kinds of myths. Even though there was still no so-called spiritual personality in this world, let alone the existence of star spirits, the ability of Su Xing Tai Sui's another cosmology to unconditionally seal the innate gods could finally come in handy. Greek mythology was not like Celtic mythology, where most of the mythological forces were postnatal gods. In Greek mythology, the natural gods were the majority of existences. Unfortunately, Hades was a natural-born god. In other words, this god of the underworld was completely within the scope of the illusory star Tai Sui. Noah murmured in an extremely calm voice as he looked at Hades, whose entire body was wrapped in the power of death. His bones were cracked and broken, but he was shooting in the opposite direction as if he was crazy and was about to leave Noah's sight. Void Star Tai Sui, activate. Suddenly, the brilliant starlight fluctuating on Noah's body stagnated. Like a galaxy, it converged on Noah's slowly extended palm. Let the universe revolve. Simulated star map, another cosmology. The dazzling starlight that gathered in Noah's hands suddenly shone brightly, illuminating the entire sky. It was like a tide that surged between heaven and earth. Not only was that light dazzling, it was also incomparably dazzling. However, most of the gods of the mythical powers present felt their hearts tremble, and a sense of fear arose from the depths of their hearts towards the dazzling starlight. It was an instinctive reaction. Their instincts told them that the light was extremely dangerous. And the gods who had this kind of instinctive reaction were all born gods. Then, these gods saw what happened. Hades, who was fleeing for his life, was enveloped by the intoxicating starlight, and his figure suddenly slowed down. Ah! As if he had foreseen his end, Hades looked up at the sky and wailed. No, 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 no. Amid a hysterical wail, Hades was directly engulfed by the dazzling starlight. Soon after, the dazzling starlight that illuminated the world gradually gathered into the shape of a sphere. With a tremor, it slowly drifted towards Noah, landing in Noah's hand. Tightly holding the sphere in his hand, Noah sneered. You'll stay in your underworld until the end of the world. After saying that, Noah raised his other hand, which fluctuated with the power of Hades imitated by Avesta's another cosmology, and waved it towards the void. Poochie! Amidst a tearing sound, a crack was directly torn in space. That crack led to the underworld. With the power of Hades, the god of the underworld, Noah could naturally open the entrance to the underworld at any time and place. Under such circumstances, Noah threw the glowing sphere that sealed Hades into the crack of the underworld, letting it slowly disappear into the darkness. Then, the crack began to close, and finally disappeared completely. Clang! The starlight that bloomed on Noah's body finally dimmed little by little. At the same time, the powerful and terrible breath on Noah's body also disappeared little by little, and the power of the three most famous gods in Greek mythology, Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, also disappeared. In the sky, the gods of the mythological forces witnessed one of the world's top 10 masters being sealed by Noah with a wave of his hand. Then, they looked at Zeus and Poseidon, who were still lying on the ground, groaning in pain, and all fell silent. It was not until this moment that the anger in the hearts of all the gods toward Noah's arrogance faded like a tide, replaced by an uncontrollable fear. Another cosmology. Why this power that had never appeared before was born in this world, the gods did not know. However, there was one thing that the gods present understood. That was, the man in front of them, who had defeated the three main gods of Greek mythology and sealed one of the world's top 10 masters with a wave of his hand, was indeed a real godslayer. With the power of the two simulated star atlas, another cosmology, other than humans, no one could defeat him. No. In addition to being a godslayer, that man was also the current Red Dragon Emperor. It was still unknown whether there was an existence among the humans who could defeat this person. At this time, when the gods were silent, Noah suddenly said such a sentence as if talking to himself. Whether it's a peace treaty or not, it's up to you. I won't force you to pursue peace. However, if a person like that skeleton who backstabs you in the back appears in your mythological forces. Noah glanced in the direction of the gods. At that time, I won't show any mercy. After leaving such a sentence, Noah no longer paid attention to the gods from various myths and legends. His figure directly turned into a stream of light, soared into the sky, and disappeared on the other side of the sky. The gods could only look at the human who left without hesitation. In their hearts, there was no longer any thought of the human looking down on the gods and feeling furious about it. They all looked at each other and were speechless for a long time. This scene was clearly seen by Syzax and Isashal at the side. At that moment, the two of them also looked at each other and laughed bitterly. This was because the two of them could already predict what would happen next. Moreover, from today onwards, Noah would also be completely regarded as an existence that could not be offended by all the mythological forces in the world. After this battle, no one would doubt Noah's ability. They would doubt Noah's ability as a godslayer. Chapter 1896. Ha 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 ha. In the living room of the Jamonli's house, Isashal was laughing out loud. Those guys have finally compromised one by one. On a closer look, there were documents on the table in front of Isashal. Next to him, Syzax was holding a few documents in his hand. Looking at the signatures on them, the corners of his mouth slowly curled up. Celtic mythology, Hindu mythology, Egyptian mythology, Mount Meru, and even Greek mythology have submitted a request to conclude a peace treaty. I thought that after the previous incident, Greek mythology would be more difficult to settle. In fact, the first to submit a peace treaty was Greek mythology, Isashal said with a sigh. After all, they were the mythical forces that had the most direct experience of the power of the deicide. With that said, both Syzax and Isashal shifted their gazes and looked to the side. There, Noah was holding a cup of black tea and sipping it as if he had not heard anything. If someone who was not in the know were here and saw this scene, they might think that the fact that the mythical forces had finally agreed to conclude a peace treaty had nothing to do with Noah. But the person who really caused this situation was undoubtedly Noah. This is your purpose, isn't it? Isashal said impatiently. Gather all the mythical forces, and then take the unlucky Hades as an example. Tell all the mythical forces that you, the deicide, have the ability to annihilate all the gods alone. In this way, even if those mythical forces covet our faith, they can only give up obediently. Otherwise, if they really offend you, they'll drag the entire mythical force down with them. In this way, not only will we not have to worry about the covetous eyes of the other mythical forces, but in order to prevent those ignorant gods from offending you and causing the entire mythical force to suffer, those mythical forces can only choose to compromise and conclude a peace treaty with us, Zizak said with a laugh. With the relationship of the peace treaty, even if there's a chance, as the witness of all the mythical forces concluding a peace treaty, the deicide won't casually annihilate the entire mythical force, right? In the end, this is what we got. Asashel pointed at the documents on the table and couldn't help but laugh. All the mythical powers have submitted their applications for peace talks. Now, all we need to do is to truly conclude the peace talks. All the mythical powers in the world will gather into one group. True world peace may still be a long way off, but if this continues, we will be able to see some light at the end of the tunnel when the disaster is eliminated. That's something you need to worry about. Noah shrugged. I'm just a loner. I can't care about the world's peace. It's better for me to be a good school teacher. It's best if no one comes to find trouble with me. How straightforward. Zizix was exasperated. Don't forget, you are now the witness of all the mythical forces. This matter is definitely related to you. Like you said, I'm just a witness. Noah curled his lips into a smile. When someone violates the peace agreement, I will have a job. The rest will be up to you. Zizix and Asashel could only look at Noah speechlessly. They didn't know what to say. Forget it. Your intervention has saved us a lot of trouble. Originally, only Northern Europe had concluded the peace talks with us. Now that all the mythical powers have agreed to the peace talks, it's already a great gain. We can't ask for more. Asashel scratched his head. However, you are now one of the top 10 powerhouses in the world. You don't really want to be a teacher in a school, do you? After the last battle with the three main gods of Greek mythology, and also showing the power of two, another cosmology, Noah successfully ranked among the top 10 in the world. Now, the recognized rankings of the various mythical powers were as follows. The infinite dragon god Orpheus. The god slayer Noah Doria. The god of destruction Shiva, one of the three main gods of Hinduism. The god of protection Vishnu, one of the three main gods of Hinduism. The god of creation Brahma, one of the three main gods of Hinduism. The celestial emperor of Mount Meru Sakra. The thunder god in Norse mythology Thor. The god of the underworld in Greek mythology Hades. The sun god in Egyptian mythology Aten. The god of light in Celtic mythology Ruger. In other words, not only did Noah rank among the top 10 in the world, but he also jumped all the way to the second place, just below Orpheus. However, that was to be expected. With the two, another cosmology, of Avesta, and illusory star Taisway, Noah alone was enough to rival all the mythical powers, let alone a single god. Naturally, he would obtain the second place, just below Orpheus. Of course, with the power of Avesta, it was reasonable to say that Orpheus, who was both a dragon and a god, would not be able to defeat Noah. Moreover, half of Orpheus' power was taken away, so it was possible for Noah to directly replace Orpheus' position. Unfortunately, Orpheus' invincibility had already been deeply rooted in people's hearts. Even if Noah showed an almost invincible power, there was still no way to easily replace Orpheus' position and become the strongest existence in the world. Therefore, Noah replaced the position of Fenrir, whose power was greatly weakened because of being enslaved by Wally, and entered the top 10, and jumped to the second place. Coincidentally, if Noah did not appear, originally, the one who replaced Fenrir to enter the top 10 in the world would have been the king of monsters in Greek mythology Typhon. Typhon was a fire-breathing giant taller than a mountain. He had 100 snake heads, covered with feathers, and had a pair of wings. In Greek mythology, he was a legendary creature that gave birth to many terrifying monsters. When it came to the monsters that he gave birth to, many of them were famous. For example, the hellhound Cerberus, the Hydra, the harpy, the chimera with the head of a lion and the body of a goat, the vulture that pecked at Prometheus, the half-lion and half-vulture griffin, the two-headed hound Otzius, and the Nemean lion were all Typhon's children. Moreover, in Greek mythology, Typhon had once broken the tendons of Zeus' hands and feet. Later, Zeus brought the god of chaos Phobos, the god of fear Demos, the goddess of victory Nike, as well as the four gods of wind Auros, Shephalos, Notos, and Boreas to beat Typhon to the brink of death. In Greek mythology, it was even recorded that Typhon appeared in front of the gods. Except for Zeus and Athena, the other gods all turned into animals and fled in panic. From this, it could be seen how powerful this king of monsters was. Typhon was fully qualified to replace Fenrir's position and enter the top 10 in the world. However, Noah's appearance made Typhon lose this qualification. Of course, Noah himself knew that if he did not count the two, another cosmology, in the situation of losing authority, sovereignty, and ability value, even with the power of Aster, Athena, and Drake, he was still much weaker than the world's top existences. In this regard, Noah had some ideas. If these ideas were realized, then by that time, even without the power of another cosmology, Noah would be able to sit firmly in the top 10. Therefore, in response to Asashel's words, Noah just glanced in the direction of Sazax. If you want to talk about the top 10 in the world, there is one more here. It's just that he has been keeping a low profile and doesn't show his strength. I'm already very satisfied with my current position. Sazax smiled indifferently. Moreover, I also have a job as the Demon King. I'm not idle. Aren't you guys just unhappy that I'm too idle? Noah rolled his eyes and put down the black tea in his hand. Say it. What do you want me to do? Sazax and Asashel looked at each other. Actually, at present, there is still a force that doesn't intend to conclude a peace treaty with us, Asashel said. I'm going to make a trip there. I hope you can come with me. Chapter 1897. At this moment, Noah was standing in the middle of a vast training ground. Noah lifted his eyes and looked to the front. He easily saw the figures of the three people who were lined up in a row in front of him. Across from Noah, Yudu, Genova, and Irina were standing in a line. Although they were lined up in a straight line, there was actually some distance between the three of them, as if they were surrounding someone. Who were they surrounding? Of course, it was Noah. Upon closer inspection, Yudu, Genova, and Irina had serious expressions as they stared at Noah, as if they were facing a great enemy. Each of them had a sword that emitted a strange aura in their hands. Noah's gaze was more focused on the three swords than on Yudu, Genova, and Irina. Of course, Noah clearly knew the origins of the swords in Yudu, Genova, and Irina's hands. Genova was holding the holy sword that he had displayed during the summer break in the underworld Durandal. It was a holy sword that could cut through anything if it was unleashed to the extreme. Genova had not been able to fully control it. Even after a period of cultivation in the underworld, he had been using it recently. However, he was still unable to fully unleash the holy sword's power and reach the state of being able to cut through anything. However, since ancient times, there were only a handful of people who could use Durandal to that extent. Therefore, it was only natural that Genova had not been able to fully control Durandal. Irina was also holding a holy sword in her hand. However, it wasn't the mimic holy sword that Elena had before. However, the holy sword on the other hand was fluctuating with a holy wave that was comparable to Genova's Durandal. This proved that it was also a legendary holy sword. As for Yudu, he was not holding a holy sword. Instead, he was holding a demon sword that was filled with demonic aura. The three swordsmen of the Jimenez clan held their extraordinary holy and demonic swords, but their expressions were more solemn than ever. Under such circumstances, Noah just clenched his hand, and the silver holy sword appeared in his hand, pointing diagonally to the ground. Buzz, a faint layer of brilliant white light circulated around the body of the silver holy sword, causing the surrounding air to become slightly chaotic. Undoubtedly, that was all there was to it. Yudu, Genova, and Irina, who were holding holy swords and demonic swords that were far more powerful than Noah's swords, felt their hearts clench, and their eyes turned solemn. Noah smiled calmly as he looked at Yudu, Genova, and Irina, who had extremely serious expressions on their faces. "All right, let's begin." Yudu, Genova, and Irina nodded and tightened their grip on their swords. The atmosphere and the air became tense. The three swordsmen of the Jimenez clan did not dare to act rashly. Their expressions were solemn as they stared at Noah, as if they were trying to find a flaw in Noah. In this regard, Noah appeared calm on the surface, but he could not help but laugh in his heart. Regardless of whether they could find a flaw or not, this stalemate would not last for long, right? If there was a reason, it was because one of the three swordsmen would definitely not be able to hold back and attack first. Just as this thought appeared in Noah's mind, a delicate voice sounded. "Go! Durandal!" Durandal and Genova's hands suddenly surged with holy flames. Immediately after, Genova raised the holy sword in his hand and heavily slashed down in Noah's direction. Whing! Along with a buzzing sound, the holy flames surging on Durandal's sword transformed into a sword wave. Like a cold blade of light, it pierced through the air and shot towards Noah's direction. Wherever the sword wave passed, the ground of the training ground seemed to have been ruthlessly sliced open and split into two. The attack of the legendary holy sword, which could cut through everything, was like a sword blade formed by energy, rushing in front of Noah. Faced with such a powerful slash that could cut a skyscraper in half, Noah only swung the holy sword in his hand. Clang! A sword light slashed through the air with a clear, melodious sound. Puchi! The holy sword, which could break all curses and spells, sliced the oncoming sword wave in half, creating a sound that sounded like flesh being torn apart. Pang! The powerful sword wave that was sliced in half suddenly exploded like fireworks, scattering into specks of dim light. However, just behind the sword wave that had exploded, three black figures rushed straight over. They were like arrows that had left the bow, and their speed was extremely fast. Yudu rushed to the front. Just like Noah, he had anticipated that Genova would definitely not be able to hold back and would be the first to attack. He rushed towards Noah like a flash of lightning. Ha! Yudu shouted fiercely as he raised the devil's sword in his hand high up. Along with the sound of the air being torn apart, he brought along a sharp force and viciously slashed towards Noah's head from top to bottom. At the same time, Genova and Irina, who were rushing behind Yudu, suddenly separated. They nimbly tapped on the ground and flashed to Noah's left and right sides. The holy swords in their hands, one in front and one behind, cut through the air and violently slashed towards Noah. In an instant, Noah was surrounded by Yudu, Genova, and Irina in a triangular formation. He was enveloped by the holy sword and devil's sword that carried holy wave and chilling devil chi. With such a pincer attack, not to mention a superior devil, even a superior devil would be severely injured if he was grazed by one of the swords. After all, the swords in their hands were not ordinary weapons. They were famous even in the legends. However, facing the pincer attack of the three legendary holy swords and devil swords, Noah only slightly raised the silver holy sword in his hand. Ultimate sword skill. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. A slash that resembled moonlight suddenly appeared, as if a full moon had suddenly expanded in this space and slashed in all directions. Clank! Along with the sound of metal clashing, the crescent-like slashes landed on the holy and demonic swords in the hands of Yudu, Genova, and Irina at almost the same time. The terrifying force of the slashes sent the three of them flying. Ugh! Ah! Groans and cries of surprise rang out from the mouths of the three Jamonli family swordsmen, but they could not change the fate of their defeat. When Yudu, Genova, and Irina stabilized their bodies and landed on the ground. Before they could even raise their heads, a silver holy sword was pointed in front of them. That's the end of it. Noah had appeared in front of the three swordsmen out of nowhere and shrugged his shoulders. It's a pity that this time, you still didn't manage to make 3 moves. With that, Noah made the elven device in his hand disappear and returned to the gift card. Yudu, Genova, and Irina looked at each other and sat down on the ground, paralyzed. We lost again. Yudu said helplessly. As expected, it's still too early to think that you can win against teacher by just a move or 2. That's right, Genova said weakly. For a swordsman, this is a bit of a blow. I thought I would definitely be able to do it today. Irina simply lay on the ground, her plump upper body rising and falling with her breathing. Her delicate face was slightly puffed up as she muttered in dissatisfaction. It's all Genova's fault. He couldn't hold back and always attacked suddenly. This kind of attack pattern was seen through long ago. What? Genova frowned and glared at Irina. Are you blaming me? It's not that strange, Elena said insincerely. But, can't you think for a bit before attacking? You want to say that I didn't use my brain, right? Undoubtedly, you're an idiot. WH. What? Who are you calling an idiot? It's you. You were already an idiot in the past, and you've become even more idiotic after being reincarnated as a devil. Irina, you idiot. Genova is the idiot. Big idiot. The 2 swordsmen from the original church suddenly started arguing for no reason. Noah and Yudu looked at each other speechlessly. Chapter 1898. It had been more than a month since the hero's sex attack. Noah had been training the Jumanli's kin for the past month or so. There was no other reason other than the fact that Leah had brought her kin to Noah and solemnly asked him to train them. The reason for doing so was very simple. When the hero's sect attacked, not only were the Jumanli's kin of no help, but they were also taken down by the hero's sect as hostages to threaten Noah. In the end, half of Orpheus's power was taken away by the disaster squad. Afterward, when she learned of the matter, she felt extremely regretful and deeply understood the importance of strength. Hence, she personally brought her kin and asked Noah to train them. To be honest, Noah could understand Leah's thoughts. It was not as if Noah had never experienced the regret caused by the lack of strength. It just so happened that Noah also had some strength that he wanted to practice, so he agreed to Leah's request without any hesitation. As a result, Noah had been training the Jumanli's kin for the past month. Sometimes, he was the opponent of Leah and Zhu Nai, engaging in actual combat with the 2 leaders of the Jumanli's kin. Sometimes, he was the guidance of his incarnation, correcting the swordsmanship of the 3 swordsmen, Yudu, Genova, and Irina. Sometimes, he relied on his rich experience traveling between worlds to impart his experience to Kitten, who was good at melee combat, and Aisha, who was good at healing. Sometimes, he expressed his opinions on Label and Losvies fire magic and Norse magic, allowing them to understand magic and magic to a higher level. Even Gasper had received Noah's training. Fortunately, Noah had a variety of powers and treasures in the past, and had used a lot of abilities. Coupled with his extraordinary combat talent and powerful combat instincts from the God Slayer, even if the Jumanli's kin were good at different aspects, Noah taught them all. Although it had only been a little more than a month, it had to be said that the Jumanli's subordinates were a group of very talented demons, and their fighting strength had clearly increased. This was especially true for Yudu and Gasper, who had divine artifacts. The 2 of them had improved the most. Under Noah's training, the former had comprehended the forbidden move during a high-pressure battle. The latter's control over the divine artifact that could stop time was getting better and better. Even Noah, who had the curse resistance, had suffered a loss once. The improvement could be said to be great. Of course, apart from this, the Jumanli's subordinates also had their own improvements. Noah looked at Genova and Irina, who were squabbling on the ground, as well as Yudu, who had a helpless look on his face. Noah turned his head and looked in the other direction of the training ground. The training ground was located in an alternate dimension. It was a specialized training ground that Leah had asked her father to build for her. The entire area had been reinforced, and even superior demons would find it difficult to leave traces here. Even if there was damage, it would take less than a day for the damaged area to repair itself to its original state. This showed how advanced the demon realm's technology in creating training grounds was. Moreover, the area was quite vast, and everyone could occupy an empty space for their own training. At the moment, in an empty space not far from Noah, Leah and Junai were having a magic duel. Every time Liatha's destructive magic hit the ground would explode and blast a crater into the ground. Junai, on the other hand, was an expert in lightning attribute magic. With the bloodline of a fallen angel, he could manipulate the power of light. Combining lightning attribute magic and lightning attribute magic, he was constantly rampaging through the space. Just like Leah, he could easily leave deep craters on the ground. Clearly, in terms of destructive power, both Leah and Junai had far surpassed superior demons. In an empty space further away from Leah and Junai, Leah and Lothias were also engaged in a fierce battle. Leah was the rightful heir of the Phoenix family. Not only did she have a unique advantage in fire attribute magic, but she also had an immortal body and was very difficult to deal with. However, Lothias was the Valkyrie of Norse mythology. She was also a talented woman who was proficient in all sorts of Norse magic and spells, especially the omnidirectional bombardment of elemental magic. The power of her spells was shocking, and she was a cut above Leah and Junai. If it wasn't for the Phoenix, most superior demons would not be able to withstand such ferocious attacks. Compared to the intense battle between Leah, Junai, Label, and Los Valles, the clearing occupied by Aisha, the kitten, and Gasper's party was strangely quiet. The three of them were sitting neatly in a row on the ground, eyes closed as they meditated. Aisha and Gasper were meditating to deepen their understanding of the divine item, hoping to draw out more of the item's power. This method of using meditation to deepen one's understanding of the artifact was not taught by Noah, but by Athena. Having created a man-made divine item once, Athena's understanding of divine items far surpassed Noah's, and teaching him the trick to using the divine item's power was a piece of cake. The kitten, on the other hand, was calmly experiencing the flow of chi between her body and nature. That way, she would be able to use immortal spells better, and her combat ability would naturally increase. Yudu, Genova, and Irina were the ones who received Noah's guidance most often. After all, compared to mana, magic, divine items, and immortal spells, Noah's understanding of swordsmanship was unquestionably the highest. With that being the case, the swordsman among the three Jimenez's kin was naturally the one who received Noah's training the most. Still, Genova's Dilandara sighed, I didn't expect that a demon would be using the king's sword as well. How strange. The king's sword. It was torn apart during the ancient war, and was then forged into 7 holy swords with different abilities. Even in the legends, they were very famous. In the past, Genova and Irina had used the Holy Sword of Destruction and the Holy Sword of Mimicry respectively. Noah had also obtained a Holy Sword of Heaven Flash, but that was only a part of the king's sword. Not long ago, the angels claimed to have found the last holy sword that they couldn't find before, and with the help of Asashal's power, they obtained the holy sword. Thus, Michael made the decision to retrieve the 7 holy swords and reforge them. Finally, the king's sword could see the light of day again. After that, Michael gave the king's sword to Irina. Thus, the holy sword in Irina's hand was no longer an incomplete holy sword, but a complete king's sword. As for Yudu, Noah turned his gaze and looked at the demonic sword in Yudu's hand. Is that Gelamo? Gelamo. It was also known as the Demon Overlord Sword. In Wally's team, the descendant of the Night King of Great Britain, Arthur, held the strongest holy sword, the King's Sword. The Demon Overlord's sword was the strongest demonic sword that could rival the King's Sword. This demonic sword was now in Yudu's hands. The Demon Overlord's sword was originally the sword of Siegfried of the heroes' faction, Yudu said with a complicated expression. When the heroes' faction attacked, I fought with him and was no match for him at all. However, at that time, the Demon Overlord's sword seemed to have faintly shown signs of recognizing me as its master. After that, Siegfried was defeated by the swordsman who had the King's Sword, causing the Demon Overlord's sword to completely betray him. Under such circumstances, knowing that the Demon Overlord's sword had shown signs of recognizing Yudu as its master, Sazax handed the Demon Overlord's sword to Yudu. If it's possible, I hope to fight with the previous owner of Jelamo again. I've always been brooding over the crushing defeat that time. Yudu revealed a fearless smile. However, since Siegfried has been captured, my goal is to defeat the owner of the King's Sword who defeated him. One day, I'll use this Demon Overlord sword to defeat the owner of the King's Sword and prove that I'm stronger than Siegfried. It had to be said that Yudu, who spat out these words with his handsome face, was really very stylish. It was definitely enough to charm the love-struck fools in Fogiman Academy. However, if those love-struck fools knew that Yudu would regularly go to Hyoto Issei's house to cook for him every day, what would they think?